knife attack on Boxing Day, has had its licence suspended. The decision follows an urgent meeting by Birmingham City Council after police said there'd been serious management failings at the club. The suspension is pending a full review hearing when a decision will be made on whether it should be closed permanently. UK house price growth has slowed sharply again this month to 2.8% as the market cools following the autumn's surge in mortgage rates. Nationwide Building Society reports prices fell by 0.1% in December, the fourth consecutive monthly fall. The report puts the average house price this month at just over £260,000. Property expert Russell Quirk told GB News he thinks 2023 will see the housing market fluctuate.
Frankly, I don't see the long-term prospects, despite, again, what those some headlines would have you believe, being actually particularly negative. You know, the housing market is actually pretty robust normally. And if you look at it from a medium and a long-term perspective, it'll be fine. But certainly it's taken a bit of a hit. But I think it's more sentiment related than it is economics related, even though, as you rightly point out, the cost of a mortgage, of course, has increased.
Prosecutors in Romania have asked for a 30-day extension to the arrest of online influencer Andrew Tate, who's been detained on suspicion of human trafficking and rape. The former reality TV star, who was detained alongside his brother Tristan, had his house raided in the capital Bucharest. The Tate brothers have been under criminal investigation since April. They've declined to comment, but their lawyer has confirmed their detention. And firefighters in England dealt with nearly 25,000 wildfires this summer, 4 times last year's figure and the highest in at least a decade. Services tackled more than 50 wildfires a day at the peak of the heat waves between June and August. Earlier this week, the Met Office said 2022 was the UK's warmest year on record, with above-average temperatures every month apart from December. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Patrick.
Good afternoon, everybody. Now, restrictions on travellers from China is unlikely to prevent new COVID variants reaching the UK. The chairman of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation has warned. Professor Andrew Pollard also said it was very difficult to know whether any new variant that emerged in China would actually have a significant impact in Britain. Yesterday, Defence Minister Ben Wallace said the UK government is reviewing whether to introduce COVID restrictions on visitors from China. Now, there's a lot to unpack here because I think a lot of people might not necessarily have much issue with the idea of placing restrictions on foreign visitors from China, but actually just think about where this ends. And several countries, including the US, Japan, Italy and Malaysia, are now enforcing testing on visitors from China. Is this how it starts, people? Is this how we end up back to where we were? Plus, a Norfolk hospital has reintroduced masks, here we go, for visitors in a frightening throwback to 2020. So, mandatory mask wearing at a hospital in this country. So should Britain reintroduce draconian restrictions like travel curbs and masks? After all, we've got vaccines now. We have got, frankly, more than enough people already voluntarily masked up, and hospitals surely have had time to actually get to grips with this situation. Joining me now, our former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and infectious disease expert Dr Bharat Pankania. Dr Bharat, would you be in favour of reintroducing COVID restrictions?
It depends, Patrick. There is not a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. If you put the question to me in a different way, which is, Dr Pankania, with respect to China opening up, do I have concerns? My answers are, well, not really. The United Kingdom is significantly in a better position. It's well immunized. We've got immunity and we know how to deal with it, and we're boosted. We're using good quality vaccines. Therefore, at this point in time, I do not see us wanting to do anything, just like what Professor Andrew Pollard has said in your report.
Now, we'll ask you, Ben Habib, the same question, which, in case I wasn't clear enough, is would you ever be in favour of reintroducing COVID restrictions?
I would never reintroduce restrictions. There can be no nuanced answer to this. It must never happen again. If anyone wants to understand the damage that lockdowns have done, all they need to do is look at our national debt, which is up 33%, look at our tax take, which is up to post-World War II highs, look at the breakdown in our supply chains and the labour market, which have given rise to inflation, which is now at a 40-year high, cost of living crisis, strikes, and most of all, we've had excess deaths this year from cardiac arrests, cancer, and other ailments that went ignored during lockdowns because everyone was COVID obsessed. And the other point I'd make on the very narrow point about whether we should introduce tests, everyone will recall, if they were paying just a modicum of attention to what was going on during lockdown, that whenever a new variant emerged somewhere in the world, even though we were locked down, we got it in this country pretty damn rapidly. And then lastly, China has operated this ridiculous zero COVID policy for 3 years, and it's failed.
Well, it's on that point, Ben. It's on that point. Yeah, it's on exactly that point that I want to get your take, Dr. Bharat Pankhania, because if there is talk of any kind of COVID restrictions, whether or not it starts with people coming over from China, whether or not it's the likes of Italy and Spain saying they're going to introduce mandatory testing for people coming over from China, I know, and we all know, that that's a very, very slippery slope. And if we look at China, the most draconian lockdown rules, people being welded into their own homes, and it's running rife now. There's no point to these restrictions, is there? They don't work.
So, look, let me answer the rantings of this Brexit MEP. It is your failings of Brexit that has made the United Kingdom poorer. Let me move on to infections.
OK, one second, Dr. Bharat, can I just stop you there? Because actually, you could argue that it was Brexit that meant that we got the vaccine first in this country, we were able to procure. So much so that the French actually had to nick some off us, right, which cost British lives, as well as PPE. So if we're all going to have a pop at Brexit, you might as well have it right, Dr. Bharat.
Not true at all, Patrick, and you should know better. Brexit or us being a freer nation has not enabled us to roll out vaccines faster or get better PPE. Not true at all.
Of course it did.
Check it out yourself, Patrick.
But it did.
Not at all. Not true at all.
The EMA was way ahead. Oxford University and AstraZeneca were way ahead. We got permission faster. We developed it faster. We got it to market faster. We did so much better. We did so much better than the EU that the EU cut up rough and tried to reinstitute that pernicious border that they keep going on about on the island of Ireland. They tried to undermine their own deal. I mean, come on.
Dr. Bharat, I'm keen to get us back on topic here, and I am concerned that maybe when it comes to the COVID restrictions that you appear to be in favour of, you did deflect towards Brexit, which I find quite strange. Let's just get back to the idea that China having the most strict restrictions in the world doesn't appear to have worked. Why should it even be a conversation here that we should introduce any more?
Let me answer that China bit for you, right? And unfortunately, China did really well when we did not have the mRNA vaccines or any vaccines for that matter, right? With its test, trace, contain policy, they were very, very good. They knew what they were doing. Remember, we had nothing at that point. Having got the vaccines, unfortunately, China continued with its zero COVID policy. What that means is the population is naive, meaning they have never encountered the virus. And when the population is such that they've never encountered the virus, it is like as if it were 2019. So unfortunately, what they should have been doing, which they haven't done, is immunize extensively, immunize its vulnerable population, and use the better performing mRNA vaccines that we used in the West. Unfortunately, China did not do that. And then now suddenly they've done a U-turn and removed restrictions. As a result, of course, biology is supreme. The case numbers will shoot up, and the vulnerable people in China, unfortunately, some of them will die. And this is a consequence of not having managed it properly.
OK, Ben, I'm concerned now that I'm looking at Italy, I'm looking at Spain, and I'm looking at certain voices in this country who appear to be quite keen on the idea that we should either block Chinese people from coming to this country, or mandatory test them, or potentially, in some cases, even deport them if they are told that they've got it and they've just arrived here, etc. Now, that in itself is one thing, and I can understand actively wanting to stop people coming into a country, maybe if they've got COVID, maybe. But my concern is that this is how it all seemed to start last time. And if Italy and France, say, did it, or Spain did it, or Portugal did it, then all of a sudden Britain becomes a pariah and we decide that we want to introduce COVID restrictions as well. Do you think that's an issue?
I think it's a huge issue. I mean, why would you wish to test people at airports if you're not prepared to go further down the line and also restrict social behaviour? I mean, what's the point of testing if you're not prepared to then take action in the event that you discover something? The whole point here is that, and it's really interesting that the good doctor made the case for herd immunity, because the people who originally argued for lockdowns argued that herd immunity couldn't be attained. But he said that one of the issues with China was that it locked down so hard that it prevented the virus from becoming endemic. But I would argue, actually, irrespective of the Chinese policy, it's rife in China, it's endemic in China. We don't know what the death rate is because China doesn't produce any statistics on which we can rely. But we do know that the virus in this country is endemic. Omicron was the beginning of the end of it, and that the death toll was mostly restricted to people over the age of 80, which is more than the average life expectancy, and to those who are vulnerable. And we must never do the kind of economic and health damage that was accrued to this country and the developed world, and indeed the rest of the world for that matter, by draconian, totalitarian regime-inspired lockdowns. Remember, lockdowns were invented in China, and we in the West, libertarian societies, democracies, adopted it without even a second thought. Utter nonsense. We must never go down that road again.
OK, Dr Bharat, do you think that the British public will swallow any kind of restrictions another time round unless there are fixed numbers on we would have to hit this amount of deaths per day, we'd have to hit this amount of cases per day? We can't just have Chris Whitty and his dodgy data.
So, look, the United Kingdom, if I've understood your question correctly, the United Kingdom at this point in time is in a very good position because of what we've achieved with the vaccines. So we've got an immune population, or a population that has encountered the virus through infections. So we are in a much better place. And as a result of being in this much better place, I cannot visualize suddenly saying we need to have restrictions, because what will they achieve? Having said that, if something completely different, something new, something unexpected starts circulating, maybe it's a MERS virus rather than a SARS virus, that's a different game altogether, and we would have to visit it accordingly. But at the moment, with respect to SARS-CoV-2, the situation in the West is much more stable further to using the mRNA vaccines.
OK, and I'll give the final word over to you, Ben Habib. Now, I read with some interest, actually, Steve Brine MP, who was chair of the Health and Social Care Select Committee, had this to say. His summing up, once the dust had settled on our waves of coronavirus, which I think is terrifying now, we have every right to not underreact. The lesson of 2 years ago was that time is of the essence. I would argue that potentially, Ben, the lesson of 2 years ago was massive financial loss, huge excess deaths, and massive crippling mental health crisis, the ruining of education for young people, all of this stuff. I would argue that's the lesson, but I don't know what your views.
Well, I completely agree. The cost of lockdown was phenomenal, financially, health-wise, and socially, in every other respect. You know, we gave up our liberty to save our lives. That is not what a mature democracy does. What you do is you protect those who are vulnerable. There's a fantastic Great Barrington Declaration right at the outset. 4,000 leading scientists, epidemiologists from across the globe, leading institutions who argued that only the vulnerable and elderly should be protected. We must never lock down. And Dr. Bharat just made the very salient point that you need the virus endemic in the population. You need herd immunity. I don't care what they said back 2 years ago. Herd immunity is the only way you get over viral infection. And you do not achieve herd immunity by social distancing, by lockdowns, by preventing a natural course for the virus. Those who are vulnerable, those who feel that they need to isolate themselves should do so. The rest of us should get on with our lives.
Dr. Bharat, I can see you're itching to get involved there. Go on, I will give the very final word to you.
No, I was saying, look, you just can't let a newly circulating virus to let rip. When you don't know what you're dealing with, it is important that you don't create deaths that you could easily have avoided, and hence the early restrictions.
OK, good time to leave it by the looks of things. Thank you very much, both of you there. That is former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and infectious disease expert Dr. Bharat Pankania, just reacting there to the latest... well, a speculation, really, that we might be on the brink of being told to wear masks again. We might be on the brink of being told to have some kind of restrictions, some kind of travel restrictions. Spain, Italy, they are already looking at people coming in from China where cases are running rampant, and they're saying, well, we're either going to test you or block you from coming in. Is this how it starts? Because that's kind of how it started last time. Just a quick point of order, actually, on a point that was made earlier. I'm just going to quote now from something. It was in relation to whether or not Brexit helped us when it came to procuring our vaccine, which Dr. Bharat Pankania appeared to suggest that it absolutely didn't. Scientists at Oxford University developed the AstraZeneca vaccine, and the British government ordered 100 million doses in May 2020. The EU, by contrast, insisted that all 27 members purchase the doses collectively and only started signing up for those vaccines last August. AstraZeneca operated on a first-come, first-served basis. Therefore, Brexit Britain got the vaccines first. And I think, frankly, that's all we need to know about that, isn't it? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on this. Roger says we should ban all travel from China to the UK. Well, the thing is, Roger, and this is where I absolutely get what you say. I absolutely get what you say. But this is where we get onto a bit of a sticky wicket, isn't it? Because do we start banning people coming from China, even if it looks as though, cases are running rampant there? I have, by the way, absolutely no sympathy for the Chinese government when it comes to the spread of the coronavirus. I am convinced they could have done more to stop it ripping through the world first time round. Not to say the Chinese people, of course, should be in any way punished for that. But if we start banning people coming from China because of the cases there, then all of a sudden do we start banning people from France? Do we start banning people from Germany? Do they start banning us? And then are we right back to where we were? John says, very finally, I don't see what the problem is with the Chinese coming to our country regarding COVID. The visitors must take a negative COVID test one day before they fly to the UK. If they arrive here without a negative test, they aren't allowed here. Yep, sensible solution that, but I suppose there's even question marks there over whether or not people should be being tested for it at all. We have a vaccine in this country now, we have lives to lead, and we have an economy to rebuild, do we? GBViews at gbnews.uk. A very contentious issue, and I'd love to hear from you all on that. You are with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, as it's revealed, more than 225,000 workdays have been lost in the NHS because of mental health issues. Are nurses' strikes now justified? This is another fascinating topic. Lots to unpick, lots to unpack. Scottish Lib Dem MP Christine Jardine will be doing just that with me next.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Today, didn't we, ladies and gentlemen? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on China and COVID restrictions. Joy says, unfortunately, I still wear a mask in shops, buses and supermarkets, not because of COVID, but because of the real nasty viruses that are going around. I have asthma and have to be really careful. I really think it's down to individuals that we know our own bodies. I think you're absolutely spot on, and this is a really important distinction, Joy, OK? And thank you for making the point for me, which is that you are doing that of your own choice and of your own volition, and for very good reason. OK, absolutely 100%. I have a concern about it when all of a sudden the state starts to get involved and telling you that now, based on what we're seeing, we should be back at it with the mask. Joy, you crack on, and I wish you the best of health as well, in light of everything that you've been saying. Just that Dave says, very quickly, that doctor you had on, Dr Barat, on trotting out utter drivel, blaming everyone on Brexit, everything on Brexit, and saying the UK did not have an advantage when it came to the vaccine rollout. What fairy stories has he convinced himself of about China? Well, there we go. In fact, I do think that China, the government, that's it, it's not the people, has a huge amount to answer for when it comes to the spread of the initial coronavirus. But there we go. We're moving on now, people, because nurses and other striking workers demanding inflation-busting pay rises will have to back down on their demands, a union boss has admitted. The new head of the Trade Unions Congress, Paul Nowak, said a compromise could be reached soon if the government joined them at the negotiating table, but... and this is interesting, ministers are confident that the unions will run out of money by spring, which is, what, just a couple of months away now, isn't it, really? With action costing them millions of pounds every single strike day. Meanwhile, Scottish Liberal Democrat leader Alex Cole-Hamilton accused the Scottish government of being stubbornly pig-headed about the issues that impact health workers. And this is another interesting angle on it, because figures obtained by the party reveal that nurses and midwives were forced to take more than 100,000 days off last year. It's a tough one to say that, because of mental health issues. So do these stark statistics justify nurses walking out on patients, or does a reasonable compromise need to be reached soon for the sake of our country? Joining me now is Scottish Lib Dem MP Christine Jardine. Christine, very good to see you. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas period. We're getting stuck straight into it right now, though, I suppose, aren't we? Let's start with the nurses, start with the mental health issue of it. For you, do these mental health figures, 225,000 days off due to mental health last year, prove that nurses need a whopping great big pay rise of over 19%? That will cure their mental health problems, will it?
It proves that we've got massive problems in the NHS in Scotland and throughout the UK. And what we need is for both governments to actually address the real issues. Because this is not a simple issue of nursing and midwifery staff throughout the United Kingdom saying, do you know what, we want more money. This is a case, and these figures show it quite clearly, of the NHS staff being practically on their knees. They're burnt out. You've just spent the last, 10, 15 minutes talking about COVID.
Yeah.
These are the people who were at the front line during COVID, who got us through that, and who now, I think, deserve a bit of a break and a bit of a boost. And I have absolutely no qualms about saying I support what the NHS staff are trying to do. They're trying to bring attention to the fact that we have a major problem in the NHS in this country. Yes, they are underpaid. Yes, they deserve more money. Is this the right time to strike?
No, come on.
Not necessarily, but there is a serious issue that the government is just not tackling, and neither is the Scottish government.
OK, what would you pay them?
What would I pay? I don't think it's just about pay. I think it's a much bigger issue
Come on,
than that.
yeah, all right, I get that. I'll ask you about the other stuff as well. But Christine, I've got to ask, come on, I've got to ask you. You're saying you support the strike action and stuff like that. We've got this mental health crisis going on. You just give me a number. Come on, for goodness sake.
It's not that simple. If it was that simple, we'd be able to solve it like that.
Well, you must have something in mind. You've got to have a percentage in mind. Surely, Christine, come on.
If you could let me finish. If you just make it this simple, either or, you don't actually solve the problem. What the nurses have asked for is inflation plus 5%. And I think what the government should do, what a responsible government needs to do, is sit down round the table and talk to them about it. Talk about how we improve their working standards, their standards of living, how we get away from a situation where we have more than 225,000 working days lost in a year in Scotland, not the whole of the UK, in Scotland. And that's a figure that is rising. And so to say, well, do you know, what would you offer them? That's actually not what this is about. If you go out there and you talk to the nurses, yes, they're struggling. Yes, a lot of them are at food banks. But it's a problem that runs much, much deeper.
But part of that problem, right, is about retention and recruitment of staff, which means that the current people there are being overstretched and has to do too much, which is down to the fact that there are now a lot of them are developing mental health problems as a result of that. If the pay was better, then you'd attract more people and you'd keep more people and maybe these problems would go away. And that's why I'm asking you, what would you pay them?
Oh, I absolutely agree that recruitment is the key, because we've got something like 40,000 vacancies in the NHS up and down the country. And that's why the nurses are so stretched. That's one of the reasons. Now, to get to a proper wage settlement, the government needs to sit down, talk to the nursing unions and come up with a strategy, not just this blade, oh, no, we're not giving them that amount of money. You need to sit down and talk to them and come up with a solution. That's what a responsible government would do, and that's what this government isn't doing.
No, that's great, but you'd love to be in government, wouldn't you? And one day you might be. Let's imagine that day is now. What discussions are you having with the nurses when they say, we want a pay rise of around 19%? What do you offer them?
2 things. First of all, that's not what they've said. They've said inflation plus 5%. Right. And I wouldn't have let it get to this situation as the first thing. I wouldn't have let it get to the situation where nurses were so badly paid and so many of them were having to go to food banks. I would have addressed that in the first place.
Okay.
And then I would sit down with the nurses and say, how do we improve this? Do we have the money to do the pay rise right away, or do we have to phase it in? What can we do? How can we improve the conditions of service? How can we make your situation better? Talk to them. Listen to what they've got to say. I had a meeting a few weeks ago with the head of the TUC to hear what they have got to say. And I think that is what is wrong at the moment. I can't put a figure on it because I'm not party to the actual negotiations that are going on at the moment. But what I would say is that I would talk to them and I would find a way of coming up with a figure which improved their situation and which the government would commit to. And the big point in all of this that you cannot get away with by trying to pin people down to numbers is that before you come up with any numbers, you need to sit down and talk about it.
Look, I get all of that. And Christine, look, I really enjoy our back and forth on this channel, and I love the fact that you come on and we talk regularly about a whole host of topics, right? And I know that you are very well-meaning, but I also know that a lot of our viewers and listeners right now are going to be going, well, we do want some kind of a figure, because especially in Scotland, the Royal College of Nursing have rejected around a 7.5% pay rise. That, towards the lower end of the people that they represent, would have equated to around an 11.5% pay rise. So we kind of know where they're at. So realistically, are you saying that maybe in Christine Jardine's hypothetical world where you're in power, you would have to go around the 10% mark, wouldn't you?
What I would do, and I don't know how to make this any clearer, is that I wouldn't have let it get to this stage. This is the problem, that it's got to this stage. Now, one of the points which is quite important about the situation in Scotland is that the SNP said that they'd got round the table and they'd talked to the nurses and they'd come up with a solution and a strike had been averted. They said that in the House of Commons. That's not the case. We have a strike. We have a strike in Scotland as well because of the combination of The NHS staff have been underpaid for the last few years.
Okay.
From burnout. That's one of the other things we've got to deal with the stress.
Okay. All right, Christine, I'm afraid the line's going a little bit dodgy there, but thank you very, very much. It's been great to have you on the show. Sorry, but it's Scottish Lib Dem MP Christine Jardine. Now, look, sorry about the ladies and gentlemen, if it seemed a bit repetitive, but I am desperate to try to actually drill down into what people would offer nurses and indeed any striking worker, because I think that's the main point, because at the moment no political party is actually saying what they would offer them, which means that no strike is going to end anytime soon, which means we might have a general strike. And all too often I am told, with respect to Christine Jardine, who I do like, I am told stuff like that, which is I would go back in time and make sure we never got to this situation, and my solution to this crisis is to sit down, talk and hope that magically something happens. And that, to be honest with you, is not an answer, is it? Anyway, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, Judy James breaks down the year in body language as she analyses the true meaning behind the movements of Prince Harry, Boris Johnson and little Matty Hancock. But first, it's your latest news headlines.
It's 3:35. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The family of Elle Edwards, who was shot dead on Christmas Eve at a pub in Wirral, has paid tribute to the most beautiful and bright star. Merseyside Police has urged anyone with any information to come forward. A 30-year-old man from Tranmere, arrested on suspicion of the 26-year-old's murder, has been recalled to prison. A 19-year-old woman from Rockferry has been bailed and a 31-year-old man remains in custody. Sitting alongside Elle's father, Tim Edwards, Merseyside Police read out the family's statement.
She had this way about her that as soon as you met her, you instantly fell in love with her. Everyone that knew and met Elle knew how special she was. Her laugh was infectious. Anyone who was around her had a good time. She loved life and had so many amazing plans for the future. She was only just getting started.
Crane nightclub, where 23-year-old footballer Cody Fisher died in a knife attack on Boxing Day, has had its licence suspended. The decision follows an urgent meeting by Birmingham City Council after police said there'd been serious management failings at the club. The suspension's pending a full review hearing when a decision will be made on whether or not it should be closed permanently. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. We do have a lot of fun in the breaks here. Anyway, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on nurses' conditions and the current strikes going on. Jan says not all nurses were coping with COVID. Thousands were in departments which closed down. Look, this is in relation to the fact that 225,000 working days were missed by nurses and midwives, that was in Scotland, in the last year as a result of mental health. Now, of course, not diminishing anything mental health related whatsoever, far from it. But they're saying that that is justification for them getting a whopping great big pay rise. Look, we all know that money doesn't buy you happiness, does it? Although it might buy you, a better holiday. And frankly, maybe as well, more retention and recruitment, which could, I suppose, in itself lead to better conditions in the NHS. But Steve says any manager will tell you a pay rise is only a short-term fix. Nurses would just have a slightly better car on finance or a better holiday. It's almost like I wrote this myself. Before accepting their new pay as the norm, they're moaning again next year. What we need is more staff to reduce the pressure on nurses. But, Steve, I think it was Steve, wasn't it? I suppose this is where it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Because if you pay them more, then you're more likely to recruit more and then retain more. So, you know, I can see where you're coming from, but there we go. Right, loads of you got in touch on that. I haven't got the time, people. I haven't got the time just for now, but I'll squeeze all your views in later. Keep them coming in, though, gbviews at gbnews.uk, because I'm joined now by body language expert Judy James, who's going to analyse the body language of some of 2022's key players. Now, they installed a revolving door at number 10 this year as two Prime Ministers were unceremoniously booted out of office.
This is it, folks. Thank you, everybody, for coming out so early this morning. In only a couple of hours, I will be in Balmoral to see Her Majesty the Queen. And the torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader. Thank you all very much. Thank you, and goodbye. Thank you.
I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
OK, there we go. Contrasting styles there, contrasting styles. Liz Truss, of course, survived just 44 days in the job. But what can we learn from that pair's body language as they deliver their final words to the nation? Well, here is Judy James, the body language expert. What do you make of that? What were your takeaways from big, bombastic Boris and, you know, let's be honest with you, quite timid Truss?
Timid Truss. You almost forget that happened, actually. Big bombastic Boris was seething. I watched his body language. He did the first start where he was doing, I did this, I did that, bigging himself out, all his achievements. And then you began to see the anger kick in. Seething anger, jaw-jutting, not like Boris, actually, or not like Boris in public, but you could see it was almost disbelief. What have you idiots done? Was the message coming out of his body language. And he kind of shuffled off, but he'd lost that kind of, you know, hasta la vista, baby bit. But I think he really thought this was a hiccup and he'd be back again quite soon. You know, it was like, you will find out you've made a grave mistake in a minute.
Well, and talking of grave mistakes, we can see Liz Truss there next to him. What do you make of her resignation?
As you said, hers was just weird. I mean, I don't know, she was in the job for what, days or something, I don't know, but her body language, I don't know if she was trying to do stoicism and resilience, but it came out as a weird smirky smile, as though she was finding it all very amusing, as though you can just see even when she said, oh, I'm, you know, the cheeks are getting rounded. There's that sort of asymmetric smile going on. She did have her family there. That was the only thing. I mean, I love the way that Boris, he'd still got his wife out.
Well, it's Boris Johnson's, the size of Boris Johnson's family, it wouldn't fit on Downing Street, would it?
Maybe that was them. I don't know. Maybe it was all of them.
Yeah.
Staff.
That football team that was over there. But, yeah.
Also, did you ever see Lizzie's lectern that she used?
Oh, right.
It was so symbolic. It looked like, you know, Jenga when something's about to... It was all twisted and weird. It was as though it was about to collapse.
OK, so those were two of the Prime Ministers that we've had this year. Now let's move on to our current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and have a look at his first speech as leader and see what the body language was like.
Good morning. I've just been to Buckingham Palace and accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government in his name. It is only right to explain why I am standing here as your new Prime Minister. Right now, our country is facing a profound economic crisis.
Right, well, your take on that?
I just, you know, like the rest of the country, I think people were looking for strong leadership at this point, inspirational leadership. And he did this speech, which was pretty flat. He did another one. Do you remember the address to the nation?
Yes.
Where it was like a robot, more so than Truss or whatever. And he does this thing where he's not using eye contact. It's like me saying, I'm addressing you right now, but I'm looking over there, telling you things. You know, he should look down the barrel of the camera. He should actually address us. I know what's happened in the past. You know, I'm going to come along. I'm going to make changes. Crimes against communication. I've got, number one, lack of eye contact. If you remember with the other one that he did, he even went off. Do you remember when he turned? Only robots do this. Their eyes turn along with their bodies. That was very, very unusual. He kind of does these little arm pumps. He did 28 of them in his other talk. And it's not passion. It's almost as though he's trying to rev himself up a little bit. Odd, you know, you think, why don't...
Well, he's trying to muster a personality from somewhere.
Possibly that. I don't mind if he just stands there and doesn't move, if he's got great oratory, you know, if he's really going to have that charisma going. And always this misuse of the word humbled. Do you have a pet hate? People who... He's just been made Prime Minister. I'm very humbled. No, you're not. Humbled is when you don't get made Prime Minister. You know, that's... He was making Oscar speeches. It was very strange when he should have been connecting more with the people.
Yes, I can't help but wonder whether or not that's because this is the culmination of a lifetime's ambition, which, if it is, fair enough. I mean, a lot of people would be well within their rights to have the lifetime ambition of becoming Prime Minister, and he's achieved it. But I get what you mean. There should be a bit more to it than I've achieved the top job, lads.
Yeah, I mean, we're not there to give him an award.
No, you've won the office of Prime Minister.
Yeah, you now tell us. It's called the science of sensation. It's how you make people think that are listening to you. And we should have felt, oh, thank goodness, it's all going to be all right. And he just hadn't got any of that in there, I'm afraid.
No, OK. Well, there are some things that we're going to go to a little bit later on with Matt Hancock. But before we do that, I think we can have a little look at Prince Harry, can we? Prince Harry's... Not yet, we can't. No, we can't. Well, there we go. Apparently there is absolute carnage. Let's go to Hancock. OK, little Matty Hancock, the former Health Secretary, asking for forgiveness whilst in the jungle. And oh, this was a classic. Play it.
Do you know what it is, actually? What I'm really looking for is a bit of forgiveness. That's what I'm really looking for.
Hey. Oh, my God, I nearly cried then. There you go,
So did I.
He's played her like an absolute fiddle.
Oh, it's on my notes.
Really?
Yes, this is my phrase. Oh. I just sat there. I watched it. I felt physically sick. I've worked on reality TV for many years, and you do get people that can get in there and be something that they're not, and maybe get... And I just sat there and I thought, surely people aren't falling for this. This act of humility, his fakest laugh I've ever seen on anybody while he's in there. But the trouble is, it was very manipulative, as it should have been, because I don't know if you watched the whole thing. When you're in there, you cannot take one person and just push them away from the pack because it makes you look like a bully, and it's basically,
Yes.
you know. So they didn't know what to do, and they had to kind of hug him. It was incredibly but he was actually saying while he was in there, he was boasting about political things like the political pivot. Did you hear that? You know, oh, this is how we get out of answering questions directly. This is how we... And then he did all
Well,
of
I just
those
experienced
things.
a little bit of that before you came on air, actually, the political pivot.
Absolutely, and we know they're doing it, but he boasted about it, yet he still did it in there as well. And then he was plugging his book, did you see him pushing his T-shirt out? So...
Oh, that was fantastic. The thing is, though, right, I actually quite enjoyed Matt Hancock. In fact, I very much enjoyed Matt Hancock.
That's a very strange phrase.
If you let me finish, Judy. Now I know how my guests feel. Gosh, that's terrible, isn't it? Absolutely terrible. Maybe we'll write to Christine Jardine and apologise, actually, on reflection. Anyway, but, I enjoyed the fact that he was, like, just totally unashamedly putting out his shirt with his number on the back of it. And fair play to the guy, right? He did all the challenges. And you know what? If the public were stupid enough, in many cases, to go along with the absolute lunacy and nuttery that was the COVID restrictions and unrelenting lockdowns and believe every single word that Chris Whitty said, and then maybe they're stupid enough to accept Matt Hancock's apology, then he can only play what is in front of him, can't he? And, you know...
He apologised, did he?
Well, he didn't even really apologise. Right, someone who definitely needs to apologise. Anyway, it's Prince Harry. His reaction to oh, this is good as well. His reaction to a text from his brother, William, the Prince of Wales, during their Netflix wine-a-thon.
The whole family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan. The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. Harry, Meghan, and Archie will always be much-loved family members. What am I looking at? Wow. He's just got a text. Yeah, he's just got a text from his brother.
Wow. Wow, just had a text. Sorry. Oh, we're on. Right, so yeah, what do you make of that?
It was absolutely... Number one, who has cameras in their kitchen? I mean, as you know, if there's a camera there, you're going to be acting. You're going to be acting.
Narcissists!
I didn't say that. Acting.
Sorry.
But he went into... child behaviours. He went into pseudo-infantile behaviours, holding that out like a kid holds out, oh, I've cut my finger, mummy. And then he actually started to put his hands above his head. And I don't know if you saw, his whole top lifted up and he bared his belly like a little kid wanting to be picked up for a cuddle. And I can see you're nearly going to be sick now while I'm saying this.
Bet, yeah.
And she went up and she went into maternal mode and gave him a cuddle. So we saw a very odd interaction there.
It is a little bit like, and this is just my personal view, not the views of anybody else's, it's a little bit like, having seen what I've seen, that he's trying to almost turn Meghan Markle into his own mother and love her like that. OK. Judy, thank you very much. Judy James there, body language expert guru. I hope you have a wonderful new year.
Thank you.
Yes, fantastic. Right, we're moving on from that now because you're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And coming up, what is the best way to be charitable? And is it wrong to only offer charity out of guilt at Christmas? Do you give money to, like, homeless people you see on the street? You worry they won't spend it on the right things? I don't know. Charity founder Nick Buckley joins me live next. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events. And I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Well, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on wearing a mask. In case you're just joining us, it's because it's looking like maybe, just maybe, we'll all have to wear one again very soon. In fact, a hospital in Nottingham has decided to make it mandatory for people to wear masks there. This is in light of the fact that cases are on a massive surge in China, and now we've had Italy and we've had Spain all saying that they're going to introduce some form of restrictions for the Chinese arrivals, and I'm worried that it's going to be a slippery slope, and that is exactly what Gary's just said. Gary's been on the inbox, thank you very much. He says, Patrick, this is how it started last time. It is indeed a slippery slope. I will not wear a mask ever again. That's Gary's view. Of course, you are within your rights to wear a mask if you want to. I just don't want it to be state mandated. Anyway, over the Christmas and New Year period, large numbers of people take part in charity work. They give donations and provide homeless people and refugees who have fled war-torn countries a safe place. But should charity work be done every Christmas time, or should we be putting in more effort to do this all year round? Joining me now is someone who knows a lot about charity work. It's charity founder and author Nick Buckley, MBE. Nick, thank you very much. It's going to be a bit short and sweet, this one, my good man. I've massively overrun on the rest of the show. But, yes, should we be more charitable all year round?
All year round. People need to work out what they care about and what they want to do. Most people who give at Christmas really don't care. If they're doing it to feed their guilt, they're trying to get rid of their guilt over such a festive period. And the only people that benefit from this are the huge charities or the drug addicts sat on the streets. You need to be a lot more careful how you give and how you help people throughout the year.
OK. A lot of people, though, Nick, will be looking now and going, oh, you know, times are quite tough financially, energy bills, food bills, etc. What would you say to them? Could they still try to make sure that they give a little bit elsewhere?
Yes, I want people to help. We all should be helping all the time. What annoys me is when we think one day a year we can do something that's going to change the world and change someone's life. The truth is, you can do nothing today to change someone's life or to help them. There's nothing you can do. You're wasting your time. What you need to do is find a small local charity near you that does something you agree with, check them out, go to the Charities Commission, make sure they do good work, and start making small donations to them on a monthly basis. That's the only way you can really help people.
Very lastly, very quickly, Nick, would you urge people then to go local with the charities? So the charities that operate in your local community, maybe you can reach out and touch the good they do, as opposed to, not that I'm disrespecting any other charity, but I don't really mind doing it with this one, given what happened in Haiti, Oxfam.
Well, I will disrespect them. Stop giving money to these huge multi-billion, multinational charities, because all you're doing is you're paying wages of CEOs, assistant CEOs. You're just wasting your money. Most of it goes to that. Find a small local charity to your area that you care about. Charity starts at home. Help to improve your local community. That's the most you can do and the most you should be doing. If everyone did that, we'd live in a better world. Stop paying the wages of millionaires to lecture to you to be better.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much. Nick Buckley there, MBE. Just urging us all to... I need to do this myself, actually. I need to be more charitable. Try to find a little local charity and give them a few quid. It will make all of the difference. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. Coming up, Fleet Street legend Kelvin MacKenzie weighs in on the revelation that everybody's least favourite Prime Minister, pretty much Tony Blair, considered gagging Britain's free press. It's Mackenzie on Blair, the battle royale. Plus, we'll have more on the return of the COVID hysteria as Chinese cases skyrocket. What does that mean for you? Before that, though, it is your weather.
Hello again, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It was a thoroughly soggy start for many of us this morning, but the rain eases this afternoon. Further showers in the west, and this is going to be mild for many, especially in the south, where we've got this southwesterly airflow. Across northern Scotland, it's a different story. Low pressure here, bringing colder air, and a feature in the far north, bringing some persistent rain and hill snow during the rest of Friday to the Northern Isles, north of the mainland, and then that snow reaching lower levels overnight. But elsewhere it's mild, and after a brief interlude of drier weather, further rain sweeps in from the southwest overnight. Spells of wet weather on and off England, Wales, southern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland seeing showers as well. A breeze coming from the southwest means that as we start off Saturday, it's 13 Celsius in the south, but it's cold in the north of Scotland, where it's also windy, 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts clearing the northeast of Scotland through the early hours, and further snow and ice issues as we start the day for northern Scotland. Brighter for central Scotland, some rain reaching southern Scotland during the afternoon, falling as snow over the southern uplands, and it's mild for much of England and Wales with rain on and off along with a strong wind and temperatures of 13 or 14 Celsius. Into New Year's Eve evening, the spells of rain continue to move northwards, and it looks soggiest across central parts of the UK. I think southern areas turning drier for a time. The north of Scotland also drier with some snow showers in places, but the rain reaching the likes of Edinburgh by midnight and pushing north into central Scotland, falling as snow over the hills. Mild, meanwhile, further south with further showers following for Sunday. And New Year's Day does look a little brighter in part, but naturally these showers as they come through will be heavy. They'll move through quickly, and it looks like later in the day it will be a bit drier across England and Wales, but further rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drier spell on Monday with some sunshine, further rain coming in on Tuesday.
Welcome back, everybody. You're with Patrick Christys on GB News. Now, the week is winding down, but I'm certainly not, because there is a lot of news out there today. Are we about to be put back into some kind of COVID lockdown? Have our civil liberties been stripped? There are calls for masks to go back on, for travel restrictions and for mandatory testing to return. Mental health crisis in our NHS? Well, it's emerged that 225,000 days were missed by NHS staff due to mental health. Does this show how tough the job is, or should they toughen up? Tony Blair, Captain Unflushable. It's emerged that he discussed censoring the free press during his time in office, with Starmer looking to reinvent New Labour. I ask, can we trust the left to protect free speech? And are we sleepwalking into a food supply catastrophe? One of Britain's most famous farmers, straight talker, it's the Housewife's favourite, it's Gareth Wyn-Jones. He joins me to warn us against taking his ilk for granted. Get in touch, GBViews at GBNews.uk. Will you go back to wearing a mask? That's what I want to know. GBViews at GBNews.uk. All of that coming your way after your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. It's 3 minutes past 4. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The family of 26-year-old Elle Edwards, who was killed in Merseyside on Christmas Eve, have paid tribute to their most beautiful bright star. Police are continuing their search and urge anyone with information to come forward. A 30-year-old man from Tranmere, arrested on suspicion of the murder, has been recalled to prison. A 19-year-old woman from Rock Ferry has been bailed, and a 31-year-old man remains in custody. Sitting alongside Elle's father, Tim Edwards, Merseyside Police read out the family's statement.
She had this way about her that as soon as he met her, he instantly fell in love with her. Everyone that knew and met Elle knew how special she was. Her laugh was infectious. Anyone who was around her had a good time. She loved life and had so many amazing plans for the future. She was only just getting started.
West Midlands Police have been given more time to question 2 men arrested on suspicion of the murder of a 23-year-old man on Boxing Day. Cody Fisher died following a knife attack at the Crane nightclub in Birmingham. The venue has since had its licence suspended, with police saying there had been serious management failings. Another suspect also remains in custody. Tributes continue to flood in for Dame Vivienne Westwood, who died yesterday at the age of 81. Singer Boy George describing her as the undisputed queen of British fashion. Tributes are also being left outside of her home in London. Dame Vivienne was synonymous with 1970s punk rock, dressing bands such as the Sex Pistols, celebrities, politicians and royalty. Her representatives say she died peacefully, surrounded by her family. Brazil has begun 3 days of national mourning in honour of football legend Pelé, who died yesterday at the age of 82. Pelé had colon cancer and died in hospital. Widely regarded as the greatest football player ever, he's the only man to win the World Cup 3 times as a player. On Monday morning, Pelé's body will be moved to the Urbano Caldeira Stadium of his former club Santos, where the public can pay their respects. A procession through the streets of Sao Paulo on Tuesday will be followed by a private family burial. Former England goalkeeper Peter Shilton has paid tribute.
He was a gentleman, and wherever he went, he left a big impression, you know, and I mean, fans just adored him. You know, he as I say, never had a weakness, really. And, you know, to win 3 World Cups was, you know, incredible.
UK house price growth has slowed sharply again this month to 2.8% as the market cools following the autumn surge in mortgage rates. Nationwide Building Society reports prices fell by 0.1% in December, the 4th consecutive monthly fall. The report puts the average house price this month at just over £260,000. Property expert Russell Quirk told GB News he thinks 2023 will see the housing market fluctuate.
Frankly, I don't see the long-term prospects, despite, again, what those some headlines would have you believe, being actually particularly negative. You know, the housing market is actually pretty robust normally. And if you look at it from a medium and a long-term perspective, it'll be fine. But certainly it's taken a bit of a hit. But I think it's more sentiment related than it is economics related, even though, as you rightly point out, the cost of a mortgage, of course, has increased.
Romanian prosecutors have asked for a 30-day extension to the arrest of online influencer Andrew Tate, who's been detained on suspicion of human trafficking and rape. The former reality TV star, who was detained alongside his brother Tristan, had his house raided in the capital, Bucharest. The Tate brothers have been under a criminal investigation since April. They've declined to comment, but their lawyer has confirmed their detention. Firefighters in England dealt with nearly 25,000 wildfires this summer, 4 times last year's figure and the highest in at least 10 years. Services tackled more than 50 wildfires a day at the peak of the heat waves between June and August, when the temperatures reached as high as 40 degrees. Earlier this week, the Met Office said 2022 was the UK's warmest year on record, with above-average temperatures every month, apart from December. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, Patrick, it is back to you.
Well, it didn't take long, did it? Despite 2 years of painful evidence proving that travel restrictions do nothing to stop the spread of an airborne virus, a spike in Chinese COVID cases has sparked hysteria among some Western governments. The US, Spain and Italy have all reintroduced COVID curbs against travellers from China, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is urging other EU countries to follow suit. Yesterday, UK Defence Minister Ben Wallace said the government is reviewing whether to introduce COVID restrictions on visitors from China. So, have we failed to learn from past pandemic mistakes, or should Britain follow suit and reintroduce draconian restrictions on travel and beyond? Just before I go to my guest, important distinction here, right? I know a lot of people might be looking at this now and going, well, hang on a minute, China's got a massive spike in cases. Should we not restrict travel from China? I can understand that point of view. My concern will be, is this a slippery slope? And then when we start to see cases rising in other countries, does that roll the wicket for a return to the kind of restrictions that we have? We've already got a hospital in this country now that has re-mandated mask wearing. I am just concerned that we fall back into old habits when it comes to this stuff. To try and answer all of these burning questions, I am joined now by, gosh, this is a hard word to say, bacteriology expert, it was easier than I thought, Professor Hugh Pennington, and the writer and political commentator Candice Holdsworth. Great stuff. OK, Candice, I will start with you. Under any circumstances, would you allow a return to any form of restrictions?
I wouldn't. My instinct says no. I do not want to go, like you say, down that slippery slope. And if we start testing, imposing restrictions, to what end? And is that going to then embolden people who'd like to have another lockdown? Because those voices are coming again, and they're becoming loud again and saying, we mustn't underreact. We must be cautious. And we've been down this road before, and we know where it leads.
Hugh Pennington, bacteriology expert, I will throw it over to you now. My concern with this would be that we see a return to overly zealous precautions. Your thoughts?
No, we don't need to go even to zealous precautions, really. There are a lot of cases of COVID running about the country at the moment. You know, nearly 1.5 million people have been infected very recently. And, yeah, the virus has gone up a little bit because of, I suppose, because of the winter. But the most important thing, the really important thing to do is to get yourself vaccinated if you're in a high-risk group. You know, if you're elderly or if you have some, immunocompromising problem or anything like that, get the vaccine. Because the vaccine stops you, in nearly all cases, having a serious illness. Most people, when they get COVID, well, a third don't have any symptoms at all. And the other third, trivial. And
one of the concerns I would have about that, though, is Hugh, has China not got a vaccine rollout programme?
Well, they have, but it hasn't been very good. And the strange thing about China, OK, their vaccine probably isn't as good as the vaccines we've been getting, but it's not bad. It's about as good as a flu vaccine.
Well, it doesn't look great, does it?
Yeah, but I think the elderly in China, who are the people most at risk, the people who go into ICU and unfortunately the people who die, they've not taken up the vaccine anywhere near as well as similar people in this country. And that, I don't know why that is, but, that's putting them at risk in China, where their virus has now taken off because they've released all the restrictions, well, pretty well all of them. And that's their problem. It's not our problem, it's their problem.
Candice, people will be a little bit split on this. At the same time as not willfully wanting to allow people into your country who may well be coming from a country where COVID is absolutely ripping through there, who knows what kind of new strain there may or may not be, there is a principle to it as well, which is that it might pave the way for a return to some very, very, very draconian rules. Where are you on that? Because some elderly, vulnerable people might be saying, just stop all Chinese travel. Why are you putting my life at risk?
I totally understand that perspective.
No, it's for Candice, yeah. Sorry, Candice, go on.
Yes, I totally understand that perspective. If we look back to the beginning of 2020, people didn't treat the Chinese government's claims about COVID with enough skepticism. They accepted that what they were saying about there being no transmissibility between human beings, not to impose travel restrictions on China. And maybe if we had done that, as if we look at the experience with SARS, we could have controlled it early on. So I can understand why people are saying, no, take a strict approach with them now, and maybe it'll make a difference. But I think that one thing we did learn, though, over the whole 2 years of what happened is that we have to learn to live with it. We have to learn to live with this. We are never going, zero COVID will never work. Unless we cut China off completely, I don't know how that will play out in the future. As a lot of people have said, I mean, Hugh will know better because he's a microbiologist. I mean, we can't ban viruses. There's only so much we can control them.
Well, Hugh, on that note, China, one of the most masked countries in living history and one of the most severe lockdowns. People were getting welded into their own homes at some point. They've got these horrific COVID internment camps. We here have a vaccine rollout, a very successful vaccine rollout. It would appear one of the better vaccines, if you can call it that. Hospitals have had time to protect themselves, you would hope so. And I'm just wondering what restrictions would actually work. I mean, we are in a situation now, surely, where we're best placed to just live with this thing. Would you ever reintroduce any kind of restrictions, no matter what?
No, I wouldn't, unless a new strain appears, which is horrendously virulent, a bit like the SARS virus, which was a lot more lethal than COVID has been. And SARS was different because basically you could control SARS by basically locking up people who had symptoms. That doesn't work with COVID because a lot of people transmit the virus before they know they've got it and so on. So all the control measures we had earlier, before we had vaccines, were in a sense doomed to fail. They may have reduced the number of cases a bit, but they were doomed to fail because the virus is so good at getting about. And let's hope that the Chinese virus, well, we know, as far as we know, the virus is the Omicron virus in China, which is less virulent than all the ones that have gone before. And the one thing we could be doing is checking the occasional Chinese person visiting the country to get the virus from them to see if they've got a new virus. There's no evidence they have. But
I get what you're saying, Hugh. Absolutely. And I do take your point that unless there was some kind of rabid new strain, then there's no need. I'm just going to ask you, Candice, even if there was some new strain that was even worse than any COVID that we've ever seen before, now we know what we know about our response to the coronavirus. So the economic devastation, the mental health crisis it's caused, the damage it's done to our health service, the damage it's done to children's education, left, right and centre, you take your pick. It has caused a massive impact negatively in every single other aspect of life, apart from just in that initial instance of trying to stop people get COVID. And actually, there's question marks over how well it did that. Even if we had a more dangerous strain, Candice, would you impose any of those restrictions? Because I'm not sure they actually work.
Well, if there was a really dangerous strain, I would look at what the Great Barrington Declaration proposed. I mean, they said that what we should do is we should take those who are most vulnerable and isolate them and give them as much societal support as we can, whilst letting everyone else with stronger immune systems go about their ordinary lives, preserve the economy, look after children's mental health. But they were, of course, demonized and they were shut down and no one listened to them. But I think that what they proposed was actually eminently sensible. So in the event of a very rabid strain that posed a threat to the lives of elderly and vulnerable people, I would look at their recommendations, which I think were moderate and sensible.
Hugh, if there is something that kicks off in the coming months or whatever, and we start to see our politicians and our medical professionals whispering about some kind of lockdown or restrictions, do you think that the British public are owed Chris Whitty-style slideshows with his, let's be honest with you, quite erroneous graphs pretty much every time he decided to wheel them out, plus an economic cost-benefit analysis? Do you think we now are owed that as a British public before we consent to any more restrictions?
What we have to do, what the experts have to do, if there's going to be any move back to restrictions, is come up with the evidence that the restrictions are going to work, rather than, the model shows this, or perhaps if we did this, this might happen. They've got to be much clearer with the public, for the public to accept like mask wearing, in crowded places and all that. They've got to be very, very much clearer with the evidence and the ability to persuade the public that what they're suggesting or what they're telling us to do is in our own interest. It has to be in our own interest. That is, it has to be shown to work before they do anything like that at all.
It's got to be in our interest in the round, Hugh, because, we're looking at things like people's pockets, with the finances of this nation. We were bailed out big time. A lot of the time people are paying that back off. Can we afford to do that again? Children's education, massive, massive mental health crisis, etc. Domestic abuse, alcoholism as well, from people being locked away for however long. Candice, can I ask you a question about the psychology of our ruling class? Steve Brine, the chairman of the Commons Health Committee, who was health minister until 2019, said, we have every right to over, not under, react. What's your reaction to that?
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. Well, you think back to where we were this time last year, when the data was coming out of South Africa about Omicron, that said it was mild, it was moderate, it was manageable. This could be the end of the pandemic. This is positive. And you had individuals like that not listening, not paying attention, saying everything we know about it is bad, we need to go back into lockdown. Luckily, to Boris Johnson's credit, he took the leap of faith and said no. And I think that's the spirit in which we need to go forward now. Yeah. 1 year later, we should take the leap of faith. We can manage this. We don't need to panic.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very much. Candice Holdsworth, political commentator and writer, and Hugh Pennington as well, Professor of Bacteriology at the University of Aberdeen. I asked you for your views. Loads of you have been getting in touch. Your views on this COVID hysteria returning. I asked whether or not, quite simply, you would wear a mask, and the answer overwhelmingly appears to be no. Never wore one last time and ain't starting this nonsense now, says Rambo. I've got Mike here. No, I will not wear a mask. Absolute waste of time. I still got COVID. Hi, Patrick. Why would anyone go back to wearing masks? They didn't appear to work last time, and they seem to be very popular in China, and that's got them nowhere. Yeah, it has kicked right off in our inbox. And in case you are just joining us and wondering why we're raking up COVID, well, it's not my fault, it's the government's fault, because it looks as though we are starting to consider restrictions for COVID based on what's happening in China. And ladies and gentlemen, just cast your minds back, because this is how it happened last time, isn't it? China, it started to get a bit tasty over there. Then we started to block people coming in from China. Then all of a sudden, other European countries started to block people coming in. Then all of a sudden, other European countries started to go, hang on a minute, what's the case like in that country? What's the case like in that country? And before you knew it, we were having our civil liberties curtailed massively. I am hugely, hugely, hugely concerned that we are on the brink now of something else kicking off. And when you've got people like Mr. Brine as well saying that, well, it's better to overreact than underreact. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. And if you want to overreact, then you can go and do it somewhere else. You and me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, as it's revealed, mental health issues cost Scotland's NHS 225,000 days of work last year. Are nurses who abandon patients to strike justified? Do striking nurses actually put more pressure on their struggling colleagues? NHS practice nurse Naomi Berry joins me live to give a view from inside the NHS. That's next.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News.
Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Welcome back, everybody. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on China and COVID restrictions. John says, Patrick, the truth is that very few people need to travel with Zoom, Teams, etc. So, yes, restrict travel from or to any country of risk. That is a very slippery slope, John. Perfectly entitled to your view, my good man. No problems there. But realistically, where does that end? So a government stands in front of you and says, you don't really need to travel. That word need, which you have capped up, it would appear, is a very slippery slope, isn't it? Because do you need to go on holiday? Do you need to leave your house to go to the shops? Do you need to socialise with people in person? Well, suppose you don't necessarily need to, in a physical sense. You won't die if you don't, but it'd be nice to, wouldn't it? And that is part of being human, is it not, John? Anyway, Stephen says, anyone knowingly ill should not travel. No to masks, no to any form of lockdowns. The Chinese can screen themselves and we can do random checks prior to entry. That, I would suspect, Stephen, is a relatively common-sense approach, which unfortunately is why it will never happen. Who else have we got here? David says, by all means, let the EU shut down. We aren't part of that club anymore, so we can stay open for business. Yeah, but you know how it works, Stephen. Oh, David even, whoever you are. David. Because we'd then become a pariah, right? We'd become a pariah. They'd go, well, actually, the UK is the only country who's not restricting this. So then they'd stop letting us in. So then we'd almost just be trapped on our country anyway, which is fine. It's a beautiful country. There are worse places to be trapped. You know, we could be, I don't know, Slovenia or somewhere, although apparently that's quite nice. But, you know, we could seriously just end up being a pariah and we'd be, you know, the kind of laughingstock of Europe. Oh, they're not shutting down. So inevitably, our leaders would make us lock down as well, or have those restrictions. Anyway, striking unions are running out of money and will have to back down over higher pay, ministers have said. Action is thought to be costing the unions millions of pounds for each strike day, which some now increasing levies and turning to public donations to try to top up their reserves. Meanwhile, figures obtained by the Scottish Liberal Democrats reveal that the equivalent of more than 621 years were lost in nursing and midwifery across Scotland's NHS due to mental health issues last year alone. So, despite the risk to patients, are nurses who strike vindicated by statistics like these? Or are nurses who walk out just piling more pressure onto their colleagues in exchange for a bit more cash? Joining me now is NHS practice nurse Naomi Berry. Naomi, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. I believe, I'm just hearing it in my ear now, have you just finished work?
Yeah, I've just finished, Patrick. I literally drove as quick as I could to get parked up before coming on.
So we have actually piled more stress onto an already overstressed nurse.
It's fine. Don't worry, honestly.
All right.
Anything to help.
Anything to help. All right, well, please can you help me? So let's deal with the issue about the mental health situation. And this was done about Scottish nurses. But how is the mental health situation amongst NHS staff at the minute, amongst nurses at the moment?
It's never been brilliant, Patrick. It's never been brilliant. And people will say the pandemic and the striking has made it worse. But actually, it was going on prior to this as well. It just wasn't as publicised as what it was before and not talked about as much. There's a stigma in the NHS, I think, about mental health. And how do you say to somebody, I have mental health issues while trying to protect patients as well? I think there's that worry from people.
I think some people would say, well, look, when you sign up to a job that is involving life and death and everything in between, a lot of that pretty grim, one would imagine, very long hours, very stressful, that a knock-on effect of that will be potentially, you suffering with your mental health. And do you think it's reasonable to expect that, nurses should just deal with that?
No, I couldn't even say. I've had mental health issues. I remember when I qualified 3 years ago, moved to a new practice, had things going on, and it was really hard to deal with. And if someone said to me at that point, well, you're a nurse, it's expected, you've got to get on with it, I probably would have broke. Fortunately, I sought the help that I needed and got where I am today. But no, definitely not. This profession isn't going in and going, right, OK, I could end up with mental health issues. I've got to deal with that as a nurse because that's what's expected.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is absolutely fair enough. The burning question for me now is, does a pay rise help with mental health?
So what you've got to look at is the aspects of why the pay rise is being asked and why we're looking at conditions within the nursing career. Then, yeah, it will have a positive impact towards mental health as well. And we can't blame those striking for an increase of mental health within the NHS. I don't think it's fair to put that on others as well.
So by that you mean that because people striking will increase the burden on other areas of the NHS, which might make some other people suffer mental health-wise, we shouldn't blame those people striking for making their colleagues' mental health worse?
Yeah, mental health has always been here, Patrick. It's always been there, whether we've been striking or not. There's been risks of mental health. Adam Kay's book documents a trainee GP killed themselves. They committed suicide. This was before any strikes or anything, so it's always been there. It's not been out in public knowledge as much.
So do you think then, and this is something I'm keen to drill down on, do you think that if nurses were given a pay rise of around 19% and there were no more recruits or anything like that, so conditions basically stayed the same, but money improved by around 19%, do you think that we'd see fewer people going off with mental health issues?
Oh, gosh, probably not, no. I think the strike, although it focuses on money, there is a lot of talk around the conditions, the terms of pay, how many hours they're working as well. Money doesn't bring happiness. It doesn't at all. We know that. Everybody knows that. Yes, it can help in terms of helping with food, helping with mortgages, etc., but we also need to improve the working conditions that they're in, and that is one of the things that has come up as well.
Yeah. One of the big topics now, just in strikes in general, I mean, there's so many of them going on, isn't there, that it's hard to narrow it down to one. But what we're hearing is that several unions are saying, at least behind closed doors, look, actually, there's only so long that we can strike for here because our members won't get paid for it, so they will struggle already, or the unions themselves will run out of money, which implies that a deal has got to be done at some point, because otherwise the government will just wait this thing out, and with absolute respect, nurses won't get anything, or they'll just get 2 or 3% or whatever it was that they wanted. What number, is there a number that you would be happy for a nursing body to settle on in terms of a pay rise? So you're not going to get the 19%, it would appear. Clearly, you want more than the 5%, supposedly, or 4%, I think it is, that you've been offered. Is there a number in mind that you would go, right, deal?
You know, you can't put a number on it, but if they came back with 18%, every nurse would be like, yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Not much wiggle room there then for you. You've gone straight, you've dropped from 19 to 18%.
You've got to go high. But I think if they came back with even 10% and working conditions, maybe it's so hard to say, isn't it? It's so hard, and my heart breaks for them. I understand it's so difficult for them, and it's the appreciation behind it as well.
I think I get that, and I think probably you want to feel more appreciated as well as, you know, getting a bit of a bump, and I do understand that. I think it's a difficult situation because a lot of patients, of course, feel as though the quality of medical care, for a variety of different reasons, has been a bit lucky in the last couple of years, and then they see people going on strike. So I can very much see both sides of it. But look, thank you very, very much. It's great to have you on the show. And I'll let you get home now. You've just come off shift and you pulled your car in, and I think you deserve a break. So there you are. Thank you very, very much, Naomi. Great to have you on the show. Just discussing nurses' pay as well, and, of course, the mental health issues there. Right, OK, so loads of people have been asking us to cover this, and so we decided that we were indeed going to do it. It's Kelvin McKenzie on Tony Blair. And the reason why we're doing this is because it's revealed that a top Tony Blair aide wanted accuracy rules for newspapers. It's all a bit Orwellian in this. Can Labour and the left be trusted to protect Britain's free press? Because for a period of time, New Labour, which Keir Starmer apparently wants to reinvent, New Labour essentially wanted to censor us. Now, though, it's your news.
Patrick, thank you. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The family of Elle Edwards, who was shot dead on Christmas Eve at a pub in Wirral, has paid tribute to their most beautiful and bright star. Merseyside Police has urged anyone with information to come forward. A 30-year-old man from Tranmere, arrested on suspicion of the 26-year-old's murder, has been recalled to prison. A 19-year-old woman from Rock Ferry has been bailed, and a 31-year-old man remains in custody. Sitting alongside Elle's father, Tim Edwards, Merseyside Police read out the family statement.
She had this way about her that as soon as he met her, he instantly fell in love with her. Everyone that knew and met Elle knew how special she was. Her laugh was infectious. Anyone who was around her had a good time. She loved life and had so many amazing plans for the future. She was only just getting started.
West Midlands Police have been given more time to question two men arrested on suspicion of the murder of a 23-year-old man on Boxing Day. Cody Fisher died following a knife attack at the Crane nightclub in Birmingham. The venue has since had its licence suspended, with police saying there'd been serious management failings. Another suspect also remains in custody. And Brazil has begun 3 days of national mourning in honour of football legend Pelé. The 82-year-old had colon cancer and died yesterday in hospital in Sao Paulo. Widely regarded as the greatest footballer ever, he's the only man to win the World Cup 3 times as a player. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, wonderful people. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on this. It's about the NHS. Alan says, remove all middle management and this will free up money to give the nurses a better pay rise. Malcolm says, privatising the NHS is the only real way forward. Take it out of the politicians' hands. David says, full sick pay, the main reason nurses take so many days off. This is in relation to the fact that 225,000 days were lost in Scotland, working days, were lost in Scotland as a result of nurses going off due to mental health, and midwives as well. Of course, don't want to diminish any mental health issues whatsoever. I'm sure many of us, many people watching and listening to this will have suffered from some form of mental health issue in the past. It's a lot of time off, though, isn't it? It is a lot of time off. Ask the self-employed how many days they lose a year. That is the view of David, of course. Right, loads more of you have been getting in touch, but I think we should just move it on a little bit now. Keep those emails coming in, though, and I'm sure you will want to actually get in touch on this because it involves Tony Blair, who is not exactly the favourite chap from a lot of our viewers and listeners on this particular channel. Newly released files by the National Archives show that former Prime Minister Tony Blair's Principal Private Secretary Jeremy Haywood wanted to regulate newspapers for the accuracy of their reporting. Bit sinister, this, but there we go. Writing in 2001, Haywood said, I assume it is unthinkable to impose accuracy regulation on newspapers. No other industry would get away with the practice of making up stories that even our most serious newspapers indulge in. Despite his appeals for regulation on newspapers' accuracy, his efforts were shot down by Blair's advisers and were branded suicidal to try. So, was this a draconian effort by Labour to regulate what the newspapers were reporting? And in light of the fact that Keir Starmer apparently wants to reinvent new Labour in one way or another, is it reasonable to say that we trust Labour with the free press? Joining me now is former Sun editor Kelvin Mackenzie. Kelvin, thank you very much. Given the fact that we were lied to about weapons of mass destruction, something very dodgy happened when it came to Dr. David Kelly, and there were some really squiffy backroom deals done with IRA terrorists, it's no wonder that Labour wanted to clamp down on the free press, is it?
No, but I think the real point that Haywood was making was that when they talked about when newspapers reported what the government was saying, anybody who's been around politics, actually either Labour or Tory, will know that within the government there's more than one view. And what the government are trying to do, so what the Secretary of State, the Home Office or the Foreign Office, they're trying to give one view. But then over there is somebody who sits around the cabinet table can't stand the Foreign Secretary, thinks the Home Secretary is a complete idiot, and actually views the Prime Minister as a complete dork as well. They are briefing their favourite journalists to give a completely different view of that same policy. So the idea that somebody like Hayward, a very capable, by the way, and much loved civil servant who went on to become cabinet secretary, enormously bright and clever guy, what he was trying to do was trying to make sure that the government's view, not noises off, was the one that was reported by the press. The difference between the press and, for instance, your own incredible station is that they don't have one collective view. You can either get the Telegraph over there, you can get the, excuse me while I throw up, the Daily Mirror over here, or you can have the Morning Star, or you can have the Sun, or you can have the Mail. There's a whole panoply. And if you want to have something further to the left than the Daily Mirror, then buy the Guardian. So each one of them will be coming at a policy from a completely different perspective. So the idea that some civil servant says, I'll tell you what the answer is, we will have, quotes, accuracy. Let's have accuracy from within the government.
Do you think, though, that the left itself has a problem with freedom of speech? Because they seem to be the lovely, fluffy liberal ones, but in name only. Because whenever you say anything that goes against what they decide is the right thing, you just get cancelled, don't you?
Right. So let's be honest about this. I mean, there has been a very disturbing piece of analysis showing what democracies exist in the free world. And then I read somewhere that there was only 6% of all the nations in the world were truly democratic. And the issue about that is both the right, the far right, and the left hate a free press because they don't like it being put to them that what they're saying is either palpably untrue or completely bonkers, and they want to crack down on it. And so being a journalist in most of the world is a very, very dangerous occupation. Yeah, sure, it is true that sometimes in this country, and I would be an example of it, can get things wrong. But that's because other people tell you stuff which is absolutely 100% true, allegedly, and then turns out to be 100% wrong. And I'm not sure what can be done about that. We have libel laws in our country, and we have other laws to deal with that kind of issue. But the idea that it's not only one government that end up hating the press, by the way, that would be completely wrong.
No, absolutely. Tony Blair, of course, has a little bit of form for not being a massive fan of the media. In 1998, he said, we have a serious problem with the juvenile media. The smallest decisions can become big headlines. They refuse to report the substance of what you do. Massive problems there, because he then did try to keep it secret that he'd done deals with IRA terrorists to give them immunity from prison, whilst, of course, we could actually retrospectively prosecute members of our own armed forces, sometimes years after they were accused of various different crimes. Weapons of mass destruction. And Dr. David Kelly, go on, Calvin, you're itching. Go on.
Yeah, but I think the other issue, of course, that he spent half his life very firmly up the rear end of Rupert Murdoch. He recognised that in that period of time, so that was 97 and before that, that having the popular press on your side was a good idea. So he went out to Australia, spoke at the News Corp conference, was on the phone all the time to Rupert. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And old Murdoch saying, I'll tell you what I thought. I don't think much of that. I'll tell you that. Right. And so they had a very close relationship right up until the point, of course, that he suspected that Mr. Blair was getting rather too close to his third wife, Wendy Deng. And then, of course, that all blew apart. And then he started briefing against Blair to the Mail on Sunday. So, look, there is no certainty about how things are going to work out between newspaper barons, who have no power now, by the way. They have no power whatsoever. What Rupert thinks about Starmer and what he might think about Rishi is of absolutely no consequence. He can't deliver in the same way as, for instance, in my time, when we had like 4.5 million, we had like 12 million readers. It was enormously powerful. Today, the Sun sells 400,000 or 500,000. And actually, if it told you to vote Tory, then almost certainly the half a dozen people who buy the Sun will probably vote Labour anyway.
Is Tony Blair lucky to be still wandering the streets, do you think?
I tell you what, he's had a very good run, hasn't he? He's had a very good run, and I think he's a clever guy, and he saved the Labour Party from being completely destroyed. He hasn't suffered any analysis of some of his decision making,
which by the way, some could argue cost millions of lives. These aren't like small decisions. You know, there's a lot of stuff there with old Tony.
Well, the weapons of mass destruction was a massive, massive error which hangs round his neck. I happened to be in Dubai speaking on the same platform as him, right? Now, this was a laugh, this. So he stands up to give this speech, which he probably gave in Doha about half an hour earlier. Anyway, he stands up and he said, any questions? And the lady stood up and said, tell me this. He said, why is it that you are a Middle East peace envoy when you started the war in Iraq? At that, the entire audience, many of them Arabs, all stood up and cheered. Yeah. Right? And it was a very good point, and it made me laugh.
Well, exactly, and you get Alistair Campbell, the likes of Alistair Campbell, you know, the guy who drapes himself in an EU flag now and preaches about morality, who helps wave all of this stuff through, and some would argue, not me, of course, some would argue sex things up rather a lot, and the consequences of those decisions cost however many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children their lives, right? And he sits there and he brings up weapons of mass destruction and he rolls his eyes at you. I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it? I don't get away with things I did last year. Calvin Mackenzie, the former editor of The Sun. Right, thank you very much. OK, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on this. Michael says free speech is a myth, but the self-serving political and media establishment who operate a policy of suppression by omission to pursue their own new world order agenda. Right, OK, yes, of course, my puppet masters will be here any moment. Anyway, Keith says the Tories have put all the legislative instruments in place for the authoritarian left to silence any dissenting voices to their insidious woke agenda. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, are we sleepwalking into a food supply crisis in 2023? Straight-talking, fan favourite Welsh hill farmer. It's a phrase you don't say very often. Gareth Wyn-Jones, who's just warned about this before, joins me after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, food security must become our top priority in 2023, say the leaders of farming unions, as soaring costs at home and the invasion of Ukraine abroad threaten to undermine our food supply. Well, NFU President Minette Batters said the event of the past year have made the job of producing food much harder throughout the world. Since we left the EU, the Common Agricultural Policy has been replaced by the Environment Land Management Scheme, whereby subsidies are given to farmers provided they reach high environmental targets. But some food producers say they've lost out due to bad trade deals, which have given competitors like Australia and New Zealand unfair advantages. So, is the UK sleepwalking into a food crisis? Joining me now is Welsh dairy and sheep farmer and possibly one of the most famous farmers in the land. It's Gareth Wynne Jones, who, very on brand, I believe, has a pint of milk in front of him. Good stuff. Gareth, right, so you think that food needs to be our top priority? Food's been my top priority this Christmas, and I'm being told that that shouldn't have been the case. Go on, talk to me. What's going on?
I just want to correct one point, just in case everybody was jumping on the bandwagon. I'm not a dairy farmer. I'm a beef sheep farmer, so
don't worry.
That's fine.
You can hear the noise of one of my researchers being given the sack outside there as we speak. Carry on.
Yeah, so I came on your channel in the beginning of 2022, and I said that we were sleepwalking into food shortages. We're seeing it with the egg production in this country already, and we'll see it with a lot of other things if we're not really careful. We've had the ex-head of MI5 saying how important food security is in the UK. Why don't people just wake up and smell the coffee and listen to the people that are on the ground? This is a global problem, okay, because New Zealand are cutting down on production. Trees have been planted out there. If you look at the Netherlands, 3,000 farms have been taken off their owners now due to the nitrate levels, so-called. We're seeing what happened in Sri Lanka, massive riots because there was food shortages. The only reason was that they took away their artificial fertilizer, their pesticides. So this is a global problem. So we look at our energy costs and the energy crisis we're in. We need to be totally secure with energy and food in this country. And we can do this. We can do it, but it takes a lot of hard work. And it does take a lot of.
But a lot of people, Gareth, absolutely. A lot of people have been calling for stuff like this for quite a long time. A lot of people have been calling for stuff like this for quite a long time, like to be more self-sufficient as a country. But for years and years and years, we've outsourced things like energy production, we've outsourced manufacturing, we've outsourced loads of stuff. And we seem like, it was like a race to the bottom. We're like, how cheap can we make a chicken? And all of a sudden you're getting stuff imported in from goodness knows where. Why are we buying in a load of our veg from Kenya, for example, when it could be grown here, a lot of it? We need to just get more patriotic about what we eat, don't we?
Totally. And we need to waste less. 1/3 of the food that's produced is wasted in this country. And, supermarkets need to be paying a fair price to the farmers and the producers. Because, we work 365 days a year to put food on people's tables. And people are going to need a farmer every single day of the year, okay? Think of that. You're going to need a dentist maybe once every 6 months. Maybe you're going to need a doctor once a year, an accountant once a year, a lawyer if you're in deep doo-doo.
To be fair, I need a lawyer every day, but carry on.
And people need to realise, we need to be pushing for food security in this country. Eating seasonal, eating local, eating quality food. And we can build a better Britain on our bellies by doing this. It will save millions on the NHS. This processed goop, and people talk about fermented protein and fake foods and these bloody Beyond Meats, whatever they are. It's crap, man. You've got to eat proper, good food. Sustainable food will come out of the ground or from an animal, and especially grass-fed in this country. We've got a great temperate climate to grow grass, to produce milk and to produce top-quality protein. Let's eat it. Let's get behind British agriculture.
Yes, good stuff. God, you've made me just want to go to war. Fantastic. Gareth Wynne-Jones there, excellent stuff. Just filling you in about why we should be buying British, growing British, eating British, and I think that's something we can all get behind. Right, when we come back, we'll have more on the return of COVID hysteria. Chinese cases skyrocket, and apparently now we all need to pay the price for that as well. No, not happening on my watch. Plus, ex-Conservative Minister Sir John Redwood and former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew, debate revelations that a Tony Blair aide wanted to gag Britain's press. An explosive hour still to come. There's usually a few explosions when Blair's about. But before we get stuck into that, it's your weather.
Hello again, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It was a thoroughly soggy start for many of us this morning, but the rain eases this afternoon. Further showers in the west, and it's going to be mild for many, especially in the south, where we've got this southwesterly airflow. Across northern Scotland, it's a different story. Low pressure here, bringing colder air, and a feature in the far north, bringing some persistent rain and hill snow during the rest of Friday to the Northern Isles, north of the mainland, and then that snow reaching lower levels overnight. But elsewhere it's mild, and after a brief interlude of drier weather, further rain sweeps in from the southwest overnight. Spells of wet weather on and off England, Wales, southern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland seeing showers as well. A breeze coming from the southwest means that as we start off Saturday, it's 13 Celsius in the south, but it's cold in the north of Scotland, where it's also windy, 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts clearing the northeast of Scotland through the early hours. And further snow and ice issues as we start the day for northern Scotland. Brighter for central Scotland, some rain reaching southern Scotland during the afternoon, falling as snow over the southern uplands, and it's mild for much of England and Wales with rain on and off along with a strong wind and temperatures of 13 or 14 Celsius. Into New Year's Eve evening, the spells of rain continue to move northwards, and it looks soggiest across central parts of the UK. I think southern areas turning drier for a time. The north of Scotland also drier with some snow showers in places, but the rain reaching the likes of Edinburgh by midnight and pushing north into central Scotland, falling as snow over the hills. Mild, meanwhile, further south with further showers following for Sunday. And New Year's Day does look a little brighter in part, but naturally these showers as they come through will be heavy. They'll move through quickly, and it looks like later in the day it will be a bit drier across England and Wales, but further rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A drier spell on Monday with some sunshine, further rain coming in on Tuesday.
Well, a very good evening, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News, and coming up, is China's COVID madness about to spread to us? A GP and a barrister debate that in a mo. Are strikes going to get worse or run out of steam? And do you support them as well? We've got John Redwood MP and former Sunday Mirror editor Paul Connew to duke it out. And has Labour been tempted to impose draconian regulations on what newspapers can and can't report? New revelations suggest they came worryingly close. I'll put that to Labour insider James Matthewson, but before that, it's your latest news.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 5. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The family of Elle Edwards, who was killed in Merseyside, have paid tribute to their most beautiful bright star. The 26-year-old was shot at the Lighthouse Inn on Christmas Eve while celebrating with family and friends. Police are urging anyone with information to come forward. A 30-year-old man from Tranmere, arrested on suspicion of the murder, has been recalled to prison. A 19-year-old woman from Rock Ferry has been bailed, and a 31-year-old man remains in custody. Sitting alongside Elle's father, Tim Edwards, Merseyside Police read out the family statement.
She had this way about her that as soon as he met her, he instantly fell in love with her. Everyone that knew and met Elle knew how special she was. Her laugh was infectious. Anyone who was around her had a good time. She loved life and had so many amazing plans for the future. She was only just getting started.
West Midlands Police have been given more time to question two men arrested on suspicion of the murder of a 23-year-old man on Boxing Day. Cody Fisher died following a knife attack at the Crane nightclub in Birmingham. The venue has since had its licence suspended, with police saying there had been serious management failings. Another suspect also remains in custody. Tributes continue to flood in for Dame Vivienne Westwood, who died yesterday aged 81. Singer Boy George describes her as the undisputed queen of British fashion. Tributes are also being left outside of her South London home. Dame Vivienne was synonymous with 1970s punk rock, dressing bands such as the Sex Pistols, celebrities, politicians and royalty. Her representatives say she died peacefully, surrounded by her family. Well, Brazil has begun 3 days of national mourning in honour of football legend Pelé, who died yesterday aged 82. Pelé had colon cancer and died in hospital. Widely regarded as the greatest football player ever, he's the only man to win the World Cup 3 times as a player. On Monday morning, Pelé's body will be moved to the Urbano Caldeira Stadium of his former club Santos, where the public will be able to pay their respects. A procession through the streets of Sao Paulo on Tuesday will be followed by a private family burial. Former England goalkeeper Peter Shilton has paid tribute.
He was a gentleman, and wherever he went, he left a big impression, you know, and I mean, fans just adored him. You know, he as I say, never had a weakness, really. And, you know, to win 3 World Cups was, you know, incredible.
UK house price growth has slowed sharply again this month to 2.8% as the market cools following the autumn surge in mortgage rates. Nationwide Building Society reports prices fell by 0.1% in December, the 4th consecutive monthly fall. The report puts the average house price this month at just over £260,000. Property expert Russell Quirk told GB News he thinks 2023 will see the housing market fluctuate.
Frankly, I don't see the long-term prospects, despite, again, what those some headlines would have you believe, being actually particularly negative. You know, the housing market is actually pretty robust normally. And if you look at it from a medium and a long-term perspective, it'll be fine. But certainly it's taken a bit of a hit. But I think it's more sentiment related than it is economics related, even though, as you rightly point out, the cost of a mortgage, of course, has increased.
Romanian prosecutors have asked for a 30-day extension to the arrest of online influencer Andrew Tate, who's been detained on suspicion of human trafficking and rape. The former reality TV star, who was detained alongside his brother Tristan, had his house raided in the capital, Bucharest. The Tate brothers have been under criminal investigation since April. They've declined to comment, but their lawyer has confirmed their detention. And firefighters in England dealt with nearly 25,000 wildfires this summer, 4 times last year's figure and the highest in at least a decade. Services tackled more than 50 wildfires a day at the peak of the heat waves between June and August, when temperatures reached as high as 40 degrees. Earlier this week, the Met Office said 2022 was the UK's warmest year on record, with above-average temperatures every month, apart from December. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Now, restrictions on travellers from China is unlikely to prevent new COVID variants from actually reaching the UK. That's according to the chairman of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. Professor Andrew Pollard also said that it was very difficult to know whether any new variant that emerged in China would actually have a significant impact in Britain. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is reportedly considering the return of COVID travel restrictions for the first time since February. Several countries, including the US, Japan, Italy and Malaysia, are now enforcing testing on visitors from China. So, should Britain follow suit and reintroduce what some would regard as draconian restrictions on travel? To debate this, I am now joined by NHS GP, easy for me to say, Dr David Lloyd, and political commentator Francis Hoare. Thank you very much, both of you. Great to have you on the show. Francis, I will start with you. I'm concerned that this is a slippery slope at the moment and that we are rolling the wicket as a country for more draconian COVID laws. This is how it started last time, is it not?
Yes, it is. And also, what happened last time is that it was revealed after the first travel restrictions were introduced in 2020. And I was acting for somebody who judicially reviewed those regulations, that SAGE had never recommended travel restrictions. It had said consistently that there was no good evidence that they would do any good. And that was when, of course, we were at a stage in the pandemic where we had very serious levels of a serious strain of COVID-19, albeit not necessarily nearly as serious as the government represented it. Now we are at a stage where we have a vast majority of the country has natural immunity in addition to vaccines. And the reason why China has had problems is because it's locked down for so long and restricted travel for so long that it doesn't have that level of immunity.
Well,
so there's no real reason Francis, to think that we are under any greater risk.
Exactly. Look, it's on that exact point that I'm going to just throw it over to Dr David now, NHS GP. Some people will be looking at this now and saying, well, in China, I mean, they're masked up constantly, aren't they? They seem to be locked down. People were being welded into their own blocks of flats. They've got a vaccine. And yet still, here we are. They've got loads and loads and loads of cases. Restrictions don't work. Why should we be imposing any over here?
Golly, if you're expecting a debate between the two of us, it's going to be difficult. Because I must say, I think it is slightly premature to think about a lockdown. I think we need to be ready to impose travel restrictions. But we're in a very different place than we were 2 years ago. We've got a fantastic team of scientists who can analyse the variants of the COVID very quickly. We need more accurate data from China to be absolutely sure.
Well, you're never going to get that.
And then if we're getting it, and I know that is the problem. And so we've got a problem with China not being totally truthful about what variants they've got. They have a terrible vaccine that doesn't give them good protection. And as you say, lockdown means that there are an awful lot of non-immune people, whereas we've got the opposite. We've got lots of antibodies, lots of good vaccines, and lots of good doctors. But it is a problem. And do you know how many people were admitted with COVID into the NHS last week?
No.
Guess.
How many people were admitted with COVID or as a result of COVID, or are we splitting hairs here?
Admitted with acute COVID infections last week.
Admitted with acute COVID infection. With the whole NHS, a frame of reference. Look, I don't know, 10,000. I don't know if even that.
Yeah, there's 7,158, and 508 people died of COVID last week. So we've still got a problem with our own COVID, but I think we've got the tools to be able to deal with it without restrictions. But that could change. It could change tomorrow or next week or any week after that. And do remember, I'm just an ordinary GP. I'm not someone working very high up in the system.
Well, no, but you crucially do have some medical knowledge and therefore a direct relevance to this discussion. But Francis, I will throw it back your way for a second. I'm keen to get your take on one of the big arguments. Like, I can remember reading a headline about a Nepalese variant that we should all be terrified of that turned out to never exist, right? And I am now naturally very sceptical about this idea of, well, we wouldn't want a new, more dangerous variant to come into the UK. Let's just fast forward, Francis. Let's say there is a new, more dangerous variant, and it is more deadly, and it is more transmissible. Do you still not call for any COVID restrictions? Do you say we've got a vaccine, we've seen the economic impact of this, the impact on children's health and well-being and education, all of that stuff, let it rip?
Well, I think there are two issues here. One is that we have never before had any sort of virus that we are able to track and determine different types of variants. And we have that because of the enormous amounts of resources that were pushed into determining those sorts of variants, which led to a very, very heavy tracking of each of the types of variants while we had travel restrictions. I don't think that's necessarily a sensible use of our resources. I think it makes for bad policy making. I think it means that you have too much knowledge in one very specific area of one very specific virus. We have all sorts of different viruses. At the moment, we have, as Dr. Lloyd will know, serious types of flu, which we have many in many winters and will continue to have. And the reason it makes for bad policy making is because it creates this kind of the response that there is a knee-jerk reaction to impose travel restrictions whenever there might be a new or different type of variant. I don't think it's good to give government that much data and the press and the public that much cause for concern, frankly.
I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you, and you've led me nicely on to the next question for Dr. David, because Dr. David, when we look at things in the round now, one of the benefits of having had the initial blast of coronavirus a couple of years ago was that we lived through it and that we know now some of the knock-on effects of the reactions to it that we had, right? And some of those effects are, massive cancer waiting lists and poor NHS treatment as a result, and all of these knock-on effects, right? Knowing what we know now, if something similar happened again, which might be about to, given what we're seeing in China at the minute, would you still recommend something like a lockdown, knowing all of the consequences, all of the side effects?
Well, don't forget, every infection is different. Every infection has different chances of infectivity. I'm afraid I'm old enough to remember getting into spacesuits to swab people with swine flu, and that turned out to be absolutely nothing. But we did genuinely feel that flu had a higher mortality rate than ordinary flu. And so there were an awful lot of very worried people. You really can't make decisions and say that's what we're going to stick to in these circumstances. You've got to have a little bit of flexibility. And I think the government does need to have the ability to make legislation to lock down if necessary or to restrict people from travel. But we know more now about COVID. And I think what we also know is just how terribly prepared we were. The USA was rated #1 for pandemic preparedness before COVID. And look what's happened. They've killed 1 million people. And that showed just how dreadful they were prepared.
Exactly.
We've got to prepare for the next pandemic, and we've got to be flexible.
I get all of that. I think there will be a lot of people out there right now looking at their bank balance, looking at the sacrifices that they personally made, looking at the fact that their elderly grandmother or grandfather who had dementia in a care home and they couldn't see them, they might have died now, lost precious memories. Their child is late to walk and talk as a result of no mixing. They're now sending their kid to school and they're getting ill every single week because children didn't mix. And we look at this bigger picture, and I think it's going to take one hell of a COVID kickoff to get people to do anything again that Chris Whitty and co might want us. But Francis, can I ask a question that might seem a little bit woo, right? But I'm going to ask it anyway, because if I'm looking at the numbers in China and if I'm starting to look at even a conversation now around, well, maybe we should lock down, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that, I'm starting to wonder, is there something a bit more sinister going on, in your view, from our political class? Do they want us all locked down?
No, I genuinely don't think that, certainly not now. I do want to come back on this point about preparation, though, because what we did prepare for and what we did know about in a number of pandemic plans leading up to in our country, which were updated frequently, and also the WHO updated most recently before the pandemic in October 2019, is how little evidence there was of any efficacy for any of the measures that were foreseen then, which did not include lockdowns, incidentally, which did include things like isolation of contacts of those people who had been infected, closures of schools and closures of businesses. We knew that the harms would outweigh the benefits because we'd done that preparation, we'd done that work. And we also knew far more about the virus by March 2020 than many let on. We had the Diamond Princess, which allowed us to evaluate the way in which that virus affected different age groups and different categories of people. So it's not right to say that we were unprepared in the sense of knowing that this was a very bad idea.
All right, fair enough. Look, both of you. Oh, go on, Dr. David. I'll just give you the final word on it. Go on, what are you saying?
I think in March 2020 we were extremely unprepared. We didn't have the resources, we didn't have the knowledge, we didn't have the beginnings of anything to prevent it. I was working in a COVID hub. I was running a COVID hub in my local area. And I promise you, it was one of the most frightening things I've ever lived through.
Dr. David, just
we
quickly.
needed to have lockdown at that stage.
Just quickly, yeah. Well, would you have, going back in time, would you do things differently in terms of the lockdowns? I.e., would you not deliberately commit economic suicide in the way that we did?
I honestly, you in hindsight, I shall await the results of the investigations with interest. But honestly, it was a very, very dark time, and lockdown was absolutely the most obvious thing to do at the time.
Okay, okay, guys. Sorry, this is. You got to love the news. I'm just having something in my ear right now. Genuinely, Stephen Swinford in the Times has just reported that it's likely that the government is going to introduce mandatory COVID tests for people arriving from China. That is just dropping right now. Dr. David and then Francis. Dr. David, your view? Good thing, bad thing?
I think that's absolutely proportionate and the right thing to do. It's not restricting travel. We'll get an idea about the variants that are coming from China in our own labs, and then we'll be able to respond accordingly.
This is a fascinating development, actually, if true, which Stephen Swinford, to be fair, is normally quite accurate, very accurate, really, with what he says. Francis, the concern for me, then, will be what do we do with them? So they test positive. I mean, we've already got a load of hotels full. I won't make a reference to what's going on in the channel, although I am. Our hotels are already full. Where do we put these people? We can't quarantine them, can we? Do we just send them back to China?
Well, I understood Dr. Lloyd to say at the beginning of this, before he knew this news, that it wouldn't be proportionate or advisable to issue these sort of impose these sort of restrictions now. I don't think it's proportionate, and I don't think it's necessary. We have very small numbers of travellers to China. We have vast amounts of COVID, numerous different variants, because we've had 3 years of evolution of this virus. It's now an endemic virus for us. We have to live with it. We have to live with all sorts of viruses. And going back to this point about lockdown, the reality is that if you look at 1999, 2000, the death rate in that period of the peak virus in 99, 2000, which we barely talk about, looks very, very similar indeed to what happened in this lockdown. We don't talk about it because we didn't have the kind of economic, cultural and social catastrophe that was caused by lockdown. We did have a lot of death, but that is what happens with viruses. They come in, people get them, and we build up immunity and they go away.
I think this is just... I am concerned. Yeah, I am concerned. And again, it's important to emphasise for everyone watching and listening, this is literally just coming through live on air, and it actually hasn't happened yet. It's likely to happen, supposedly anyway, that the government will introduce mandatory tests for people arriving from China, COVID tests. I hope that I'm not sitting here in a couple of months' time and thinking this was what paved the way for them to start testing everybody from every single country again, and then it all hyped up again. I just have terrible deja vu about all this. Look, both of you, thank you very, very...
Let's get on top of it now. Let's test those very few people coming from China, identify genomically what the variants are, and see whether we've got antibodies to them. I think that's an entirely sensible thing to do. I'm not proposing locking down or getting draconian, as you right-wingers would quite like to do. I would like this to be proportionate and that we stay on top of the virus. The thing about COVID is that we've got new tools now. We can monitor illness much more effectively.
Yes, to be fair, it was, and just a minor point of correction there, Dr. David, it was supposedly the most left-wing countries in the world, New Zealand and Canada, who had the most draconian restrictions, so let's have it right. Anyway, enough of that. NHS GP, Dr. David Lloyd, and political commentator Francis Hoare, just reacting, actually, as it turned out, to the latest information that's just dropped to us, which is that supposedly, anyway, this government is very likely to introduce mandatory testing for arrivals from China. Good idea, bad idea, your views, GBViews at gbnews.uk. I can very much see both sides to that argument, actually. Anyway, you're with me, Patrick Christys, coming up. After a Labour MP said on this show yesterday, this was a classic, that he supported a general strike, yeah, you heard, supported a general strike, should the public be throwing its weight behind the unions? We'll debate all that. I think the unions are going to go skint soon and the government should just wait it out.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Well, nothing like a little bit of breaking rumour, is there, ladies and gentlemen? Supposedly, anyway, the government is very likely to introduce mandatory testing for people coming into this country from China. Your views on that? Because some people would say, OK, this is a good thing. We can identify any new variants quickly. We can also stop, well, any more cases than necessary from entering this country. Other people might say, isn't this how it all started last time? We started testing people, and then it all started to snowball from there in terms of COVID restrictions and infringements on our civil liberties. Lots of you have been getting in touch on this. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Nick says, the real question is, do you trust China to tell us any issues or share data? No. No, I absolutely don't. And I think something that remarkably, I think, isn't spoken about anywhere near enough is how responsible the Chinese government are for where we are now and where we were before. I find it incredibly difficult to believe that this particular virus started in a wet market. It may well have done. That's the narrative. I find it incredibly difficult to believe they didn't know more about it before they managed to somehow allow it to get out all across the world and rip through and all of this stuff. I think the Chinese government has a hell of a lot to answer for when it comes to the reasons why we are where we are. Anyway, Robert says, Patrick, why bother stopping anyone from China entering the UK? It's a flu virus, granted a little more powerful, but still flu. We need to be exposed to it to continue building immunity. Look, Robert, my inclination is to go with you on that one, but a lot of people might think, well, if there's a new, more deadly variant. That said, though, all the evidence suggests that it wouldn't stop it from getting into us anyway, so what's the point? Ben says, if China don't supply the information about COVID, then surely it's important that our borders are closed to flights and people coming from China's mainland. Joe's on as well. The Chinese have lied for years over COVID and cost us thousands of lives. Very true. It is rampant there now to restrict access until levels drop. I just don't see levels actually dropping over there. Their vaccine is clearly absolutely naff. I mean, even worse than, some of the other vaccines out there at the minute. And they have had draconian lockdowns. They've had people wearing masks since the dawn of time over there, and nothing has happened. I don't see the situation in China getting any better. I just think it's going to be a case of people having to learn to live with this thing. But now, it's been a Christmas of chaos this year, with unions across the board staging walkouts and the government so far firmly resisting the strikers' pay demands. But if you thought the situation was bad under the Conservatives, just listen to Labour MP Khalid Mahmood, who told me yesterday on this very show that he supported a general strike. Look at this.
Support the rights of the people to be able to strike. If they want to coordinate that, they're totally at will to do that. And if you don't call that a general strike, yes, because the people who work want to have the right sort of pay and conditions, and they should be able to do that.
Well, that is baffling, isn't it? I'm not quite sure he realised exactly what he said there, but I'm delighted to be joined now by Conservative MP Sir John Redwood and former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew. Great stuff, chaps. Thank you very much for joining me. John Redwood, I will start with you. Shouldn't the government just wait it out because the unions are on the brink of going bankrupt, aren't they?
I think the government should judge each case on its merits, and I think the different groups of workers are in different positions. They have different bargaining strengths and different degrees of common sense in what they're asking. I think if you take the health unions, I've called for a proper manpower plan to be produced urgently. We've been waiting for one for over a year from all these top managers that have paid big salaries in the health service, because we need to solve the problem of too many agency workers, of too many vacancies, not being able to recruit and retain enough nursing staff and enough doctors. There's a pensions issue and a tax issue with quite a lot of the doctors, leading to early retirement. I think those problems need working through, and the government needs to sit down with its senior advisors and its senior managers and ask those managers, why are they allowed to get it into the current situation, and what are they going to do? Where is the manpower plan to solve it? Whereas if you take the railways, they're striking against themselves. Their main problem is that they don't have nearly enough fare-paying passengers, and the passengers they do have only want to pay very low or discounted fares.
Well, yeah, and I
so
know
if they
with
carry
some
on
interest.
striking, they'll destroy their market even more, and the government should not be paying to send empty trains around the country.
Well, no, absolutely not. They should not. Paul, I'll bring you in now, former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew. I couldn't help but wonder whether or not this talk of a general strike is like the last throw of a dice from unions who maybe realise that actually the leverage is slipping away from them in this debate.
Well, I question whether the TUC are going to sort of formally back a general strike, but a de facto general strike. That's how it'll be billed by the right-wing press, and and it will be something akin to a general strike. But for once, I agree with John on one point, to my surprise, and that is that I think each dispute has to be looked at separately. And the government are digging themselves into a strange position. It's almost like a time warp where it's following a sort of Ted Heath strategy of who governs Britain, the government or the union barons, which really is an absurd situation. It doesn't apply now. And I'm sure John remembers that one of the first things that Margaret Thatcher did was to give a pretty hefty pay hike to the public sector unions when she became Prime Minister.
OK. John, I think some people will be thinking, actually, a general strike right now is just morally unconscionable. The nation is sending a load of money off to Ukraine as it is. People's energy bills are going through the roof. We're paying off the pandemic. And then on top of that, if we want to... I mean, the railways alone apparently cost us 30 million quid a day when they go on strike. I mean, what do they want to do? Just bankrupt the country?
Well, they're striking against themselves. It is very worrying that so many public sector unions in particular seem to be coordinating action, and that is a very bad idea because they are striking against themselves and their families as well as against the rest of us. Not many private sector businesses or unions are involved in this, so that quite a lot of our important services, like food provision, is going ahead. But it is extremely worrying that the public sector is in this situation.
Paul, go on.
We do need. Look at the equation. Currently, inflation at over 10%.
Both of you stop. Paul, go on.
Well, look, John, to John, look, we have inflation of over 10%. We have the average public sector pay rise is 2.7%. That follows a decade of austerity and a lot of pay freezes in the public sector, while in the private sector, the average pay rise is now 6.9%. So it's not surprising in this cost of living situation that these strikes in the public sector are going ahead. And public sympathy for the health sector, I think, is still very strong, less so for the rail strikers. But even there, the government seemed to have stepped in to almost sabotage a potential agreement, which seemed to be close 10 or 12 days ago.
OK, now, John, can I just put this to you? Look, it's pretty obvious. I'm not exactly banging in favour of these strikes. I come on telly every day and criticise them, right? But at the same time, I can see the logic behind the idea that we've got the money to lob a blank cheque over to the Ukrainians, but we haven't got money for some of our own workers over here. Answer that.
Well, I think the sums of money are very different, aren't they? I mean, yes, we are, after America, being pretty generous in helping Ukraine in its struggle for democracy and for independence of its country. But these are much smaller sums of money than we're talking about for any one of these major union proposed settlements. And I think there is general agreement, I think the unions would agree as well, that we cannot afford a 19% pay award for some of the health
What the negotiating stance, John? You know that. The nurses don't expect to get 19%.
All right, Paul, all right.
I didn't talk across you. Don't talk across me.
Yeah, go on.
I'm suggesting something different, which is that with health, we need a proper manpower plan, and that should include proper management of increments, promotions, proper gradings of the different jobs and tasks around quality and providing a more interesting job for people. I think there needs to be some intelligent work-throughs on all this. So that we can respond to cost of living pressures whilst delivering more and better service. That must be what we need those senior managers to do.
Paul, you mentioned compromise there, I think, and I get the idea, I get how a negotiation works, don't get me wrong. However, there wasn't that much negotiation taking place in Scotland, was there? Where the Royal College of Nursing were offered something that was around a 7.5% pay increase across the board on average, 11.5% for the people at the lower end of their pay structure. They knocked that right back, and that does make me think that maybe the unions don't particularly want to negotiate. They've got their demands and they'll stick to it.
I don't think that. I mean, in Scotland, it's an ongoing situation, but I don't think that's the situation at all. And we're getting some strange propaganda from the government about £28 billion, the cost of settling these strikes. Well, many economists challenge that, and say that we have a progressive tax system. That, in fact, in reality, with the pay rises, you would also get higher tax revenue and, of course, a higher spending in the shops, and the real cost of this is probably more in the region of 12 to 14 billion.
Now that's interesting. But can I just ask? Sorry, chaps. It's just we are a bit pressed for time, and I appreciate both of your time here. John, it's only fair. I asked Khalid Mahmood yesterday, Labour MP, whether or not he supported a general strike. He just said yes. OK, which fair enough in his view. I've got to ask you, John, as a Conservative MP, if a general strike is called and they give it a date, do you think the government should do anything to stop that?
Well, of course, the government should do everything in its power to stop these strikes because they are deeply damaging to the public services, to the economy and to all the rest of us. I think we need more something for something deals because what we need to do, if you take the railways as an example, is improve productivity and quality of service whilst paying people more because they're delivering more. That's the kind of deal we need, and that requires intelligent management from these senior managers who are paid a fortune but have upset their staff and are not delivering at the moment.
OK, all right. And do you think, then, that if they call the general strike, very lastly, sorry, I know I'm getting shouted at here, but very lastly, John, I just want to drill down on this. If they said, if the TUC come out and say, we're going to have a general strike on this date right now, do you think that the government should move on its negotiating position, whatever that is, for each of them, it should say, right, for the sake of the country not grinding to a halt, for the sake of the economic damage in the round on this, we will, out of the goodness of our hearts, go to you and give you a better offer, whatever it is?
No, of course you don't give in to threats, but I also don't think the TUC are bad enough or wrong enough to call a general strike. And I don't think they'd be able to because vast swathes of the private sector are getting on with the jobs they need to do, and they're serving us extremely well.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very much. Sorry not to go back to you there, Paul, but I just wanted to drill down a little bit with the Tory MP, if that's all right. But
Can I just say that like wars, industrial disputes tend to end in compromise rather than total victory or total defeat.
Yeah.
OK, well, both of you, thank you very much. Conservative MP Sir John Redwood there, former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul, gone you. Right, you are with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, as it's revealed, a top Tony Blair aide wanted accuracy rules for newspapers. Can Labour and the left be trusted to protect Britain's free press? That's coming up after this break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Welcome back. Now, newly released files by the National Archives show that former Prime Minister, the unflushable Tony Blair's principal private secretary, Jeremy Haywood, wanted to regulate newspapers for the accuracy of their reporting. Writing in 2001, Haywood said, "I assume it's unthinkable to impose accuracy regulations on newspapers. No other industry would get away with the practice of making up stories that even our most serious newspapers indulge in." Well, despite his appeals for regulation on newspapers' accuracy, his efforts were shot down by Blair's advisers, were branded suicidal, not, by the way, immoral or anything like that, just suicidal. It would be bad politics to try it. So, was this a draconian effort by Labour to regulate what the newspapers were reporting? To discuss this, I'm joined now by the former spokesperson of the chair of the Labour Party, is James Matthewson. James, thank you very much. Look, slightly concerning for me this. Keir Starmer's looking to, in some ways anyway, recreate New Labour. Would New Labour have actually, if they had their way, been pretty happy to just censor the free press?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Patrick. I don't think you're right in saying that Keir Starmer wants to recreate New Labour in that sense. I'm certainly not supportive of many aspects of the New Labour government, but I do support Keir Starmer as leader. But regardless of that, I don't think we're at any risk of press freedoms being imposed by a Labour government, and I don't think this is an exclusive issue in the Labour Party either. I mean, we've seen in recent years, Boris Johnson's government especially, trying to curtail freedom of the press. I think whoever's in power, to be honest, it's in their best interest for themselves to try and keep as much out of the press as they can. So I don't think it's a party political issue, but it is important that we protect freedom of the press. You're absolutely right.
I'm just intrigued to get your take on the Blair issue, though, really, because I am amazed by Tony Blair, Teflon Tony, really, when you think about some of the issues that he faced and was a part of during his time as Prime Minister. Many good aspects to Blair, many things that people can learn from, and I hold my hands up to that completely. I do think that things, though, like weapons of mass destruction, a variety of certain question marks around David Kelly, which we're not allowed to go into, of course, and also secret backroom deals with the IRA, which really gave terrorists quite literally a get-out-of-jail-free card. I think he's managed to get off quite lightly with stuff like that. Do you think that Tony Blair has got away with it?
I don't think that anything in particular. I mean, when it comes to Tony Blair, particularly as a leader, I mean, he's not my favourite Labour leader of all time, far from it. I do think, the Iraq issue especially is still hugely polarising, not just in the Labour Party, but in the country. Many people were thrilled with the New Labour victory, in 1997, my family especially, and, people in my community hugely so, because it meant a huge amount. And there was a huge reform and huge change made by that government, and later by Gordon Brown's government as well. And, I do think there's a huge amount of pros, but like anything, there's always cons. I don't think, though, when it comes to accountability of the press, particularly when we look at this new information released by the National Archives, there's anything to be concerned about, particularly because Jeremy Haywood, as we know, wasn't a Labour person. He wasn't affiliated to the Labour Party. He was a civil servant, a hugely respected civil servant as well.
Yes, indeed. Does the left itself have a problem with free speech? I can't help but feel as though a lot of the tantrums that I've seen, a lot of the cancellations that take place appear to be done at the hand of the people towards the left of society. I think people on the right tend to be a little bit more live and let live when it comes to freedom of speech. Your views?
Yeah, I think you'd probably be inclined to say that, wouldn't you, Patrick? But I do disagree, because as a proud left-winger myself, I don't have an issue with freedom of speech. I invite criticism of my views. I do think in recent years there's been a conflation of very what I would call hyper-woke individuals who often aren't politically affiliated in any way, trying to shut down or cancel freedom of speech. Totally agree with you there. Cancelling anybody is nonsense. It's nonsense. And I don't think any genuine left-winger who wants to be in government and wants to pursue policies to change people's lives for the better would agree with it in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just looking at, for example, the kind of nonsense that, like, J.K. Rowling, or I'm quoting now, I'm certainly not calling her a TERF to have to put up with online and people like that. I mean, look, there are various different groups out there that, as we all know, when someone maybe tries to set up some kind of, I don't know, new media company or something, and they don't like the idea of it, then they go, right, you need to ban all your advertisers, get them cancelled. Even down to people, there was a train company, I think it was Virgin Trains years ago, they stopped selling the Daily Mail because one person complained that they had to look at the Daily Mail as they walked through the coffee cart. All of this stuff, that doesn't happen with right-wingers in this country, does it? I mean, it is just people on the left.
There's a reason for that, and I would say it's because the majority of our press and media is skewed in favour of the right. It's skewed in favour of the right, and that's because, there are a lot of people with conservative views in this country, right? It is their right and their freedom to have their views and, to be represented. But there is less representation for people on the left, and as a result, you hear them complaining more about it. They're going to complain more about it. But I do think when it comes to issues, like J.K. Rowling, like the gender debate that's been hugely divisive, I think the extremes on both sides that we're seeing are hugely concerning. It's important for people to take a reasoned approach.
Final question, very quick one. Would you bring back Blair?
In regard to the current government, absolutely. In a heartbeat, there isn't a single Conservative Prime Minister that I've seen that I wouldn't rather have Tony Blair and John. That's saying a lot, because like I say, I'm not his biggest fan, but in comparison to this shower, any day of the week.
All right, well, I certainly agree to disagree on that one. James, always a pleasure. James Matthew, the son there, easy for me to say, spokesperson of the chair of the Labour Party, former spokesperson of the chair of the Labour Party. Right, OK, it's been the most remarkable year for the royal family. Let's lighten it up a bit towards the end, people. Been a remarkable year for the royal family in living memory, and last night it got even more dramatic. Literally. That's because lefty broadcaster Channel 4 aired their controversial show, Prince Andrew, the musical. Let's take a look.
It was the car crash royal interview that shocked the world.
Your Royal Highness, how do you think that went?
Well,
I nailed it. I did everything right.
now comes the musical extravaganza of the year.
Story of the season, unforgettable, unmissable, with just a whiff of treason.
I've not actually seen that before. That's great. Anyway, and speaking of fictional retellings, in the new year, Prince Harry is releasing his royal hatchet job titled Spare. Yeah, there you go. Well, I'll tell you what, when the cold bites, at least we'll have some firewood. Anyway, joining me to discuss a whirlwind period for the royals is the former butler to King Charles. It's Grant Harrell. Grant, thank you very much. Fantastic jacket, my good man. Always good, always good.
Thank you. I'm auditioning for that show, I think, somehow.
Yeah, indeed. Have you had a chance to catch any of Prince Andrew the musical?
I watched the first couple of minutes out of curiosity, and I realised that this was not the Sound of Music, so I decided to turn it off.
No, just in a wider sense, before we have a good chat a little bit about a couple of the things from this year. Do you think the royal family is, unfortunately, becoming increasingly more of a soap opera, whether or not it's things like this Channel 4 musical or whether it's the Netflix stuff, you know?
Do you know, the reality is, Patrick, I think with the royal family, there's always an interest. There always has been, there always will be an interest, and that's to their benefit, because at the end of the day, we need to be interested in the royal family for us to have the royal family. The soapbox part, it's not great, because obviously, you know, from any organisation that wants to promote the royal family, they're promoting what they're trying to do. When there's anything negative, it's not the best thing in the world, and it's quite difficult. But they do live their lives in a kind of fishbowl, if I can say that, because that is the reality of working for the royal family. I'm aware of that is what it's like. And it's not the most glamorous lifestyle everybody thinks it is. Yes, they get to live in palaces and castles, and they have people like myself to help look after them. But the reality is it can be quite a tough job. And I personally, when I was a youngster, I was thinking, wouldn't it be amazing to be a member of the royal family? Now, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, because it's not the easiest. It really isn't the easiest job, and you are basically in the media almost 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It can be like that.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, look, normally at this point, I would probably ask you something about what's been your royal highlight and royal lowlight of the year, but I think both those questions probably answer themselves this year, don't they, with everything that's gone on. But will the royal family be quite happy to see the back of 2022, do you think?
I think so. It's a difficult one, Patch. Again, obviously the law is obviously the Queen's death, which, do you know, it's just over 4 months, and we're not far off half a year, and I can't believe that. And I think with anyone that's lost a family member this year, part of you wants to move into the new year, but the other part of you doesn't, because you don't want it to be that long since you lost somebody that you cared about, and it's a difficult one. But the positive is next year is we've got a coronation. So it is a positive year, and I think looking forward, hopefully, it will be a better year for them.
Right, now you, former butler to King Charles, how will he be approaching the coronation? Can I just say, I've got concerns about him. I've got concerns about him. There was Pengate. I know he just lost his mum, but there wasn't just Pengate. There was something else as well, where he got a little bit shirty with a member of staff. Was he ever like that with you?
No, never. There was Pengate, and there was a leaking pen, wasn't it? And the desk when you were saying the proclamation. Do you know, I watched that, and I really felt for him, because I could understand frustration. In all honesty, Patrick, and I've never had to, this is my honest, I'm telling the truth here, he never ever, in all the years I worked for him, ever even raised his voice. He was a fantastic employer. So when I see those little sketches of obviously what happened, it does make me smile. I can understand his frustration, but see, it wouldn't have happened, Patrick, if I was still there. That's the reality of it, I think.
There's absolutely no way there would have been a leaky pen or no pen or the pen being too close to him if you were still there. Is there very much a difference? Is there very much a difference between the characters of King Charles and Prince Andrew?
Do you mean from knowing them personally as to what we see in the media kind of thing?
In your impression, so you said things there like, you know, King Charles never raised his voice and all of this stuff. From various different reports, maybe Prince Andrew is a bit different.
See, my memories of Prince Andrew, he was absolutely fine. I got on really well with him. He was always polite. I mean, like everyone, I've heard the different stories and the different variations and about his moods and things. But see, I never witnessed that. And the difficult part for me, Patrick, is to kind of say, oh, it's true, because I don't know if it's true. As I said, I was quite lucky that I got on with him. And King Charles, I mean, the King Charles that I see, I like it when you see the funny side of things, when you see him kind of being a bit humorous and jokey, because that's very much what I remember. I remember that humorous, jokey side.
Very finally, now, Grant, the book Spare will be out. I don't think I've actually spoken to you about what you made of this Netflix drama. You may, of course, recognise my voice from that drama. I'm yet to see the royalties. I was in it twice. They didn't ask for my permission. My privacy was invaded. But anyway, yes. So, what do you think about this book Spare? Will the royal family be bricking it?
Patrick, I think Hollywood's going to be calling you any minute. As far as the book goes, I think the reality is, yes, it's going to be worrying because we've just had the Netflix documentary. We don't know what else there is that could come out. And the only positive is it's coming out in January, which means that there is a few months before the coronation. And hopefully if there's any kind of damage that is done by it, it can be sorted before the coronation. I'm just hoping that 2023 is a happier and better year for not just the royal family, hopefully for everyone.
I think he should swerve the coronation. I think if he wants to take Netflix's tens of millions and he wants to write a book about it and he wants to trash his own family, then he should swerve the coronation. Because also, you can't trust him these days. He might have a hidden camera with him. Anyway, Grant, thank you very much. You and your fabulous jacket. I hope you have a wonderful new year, or Hogmanay, or whatever you call it.
Thank you.
Anyway, all right. There, Grant Harold, yes, there we are. Right, OK, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Well, not for any longer, actually, really, because I'm lobbing you over now to the wonderful Emily Carver. Emily, what do you got coming up for us?
Great show. I don't think I'll be rushing to see Prince Andrew the musical. No. Anyway, I don't know if you saw Annalise Dodds. She's the shadow Women and Equalities Minister. She made some rather bizarre claim that black families are 5 times less likely to be able to pay their energy bills, and therefore this is an example of structural racism that the Labour Party will fix with a new race equality law. I don't know about you, but I think Labour are getting away with not enough scrutiny, so I'm going to be putting the light back on them tonight.
Good stuff, Emily. I've decided to join Annalise Dodds in protest and not pay my energy bills until they stop being racist. Thank you very much. OK, Emily Carver there, in for Jubes & Co, as ever, doing an absolutely stellar job. Don't go anywhere, people. Tune in to Emily for the next hour of your lives. You won't regret it.
Hello again, Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. It was a thoroughly soggy start for many of us this morning, but the rain eases this afternoon. Further showers in the west, and this is going to be mild for many, especially in the south, where we've got this southwesterly airflow. Across northern Scotland, it's a different story. Low pressure here, bringing colder air, and a feature in the far north, bringing some persistent rain and hill snow during the rest of Friday to the Northern Isles, north of the mainland, and then that snow reaching lower levels overnight. But elsewhere it's mild, and after a brief interlude of drier weather, further rain sweeps in from the southwest overnight. Spells of wet weather on